Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Sunday, July 7th, 2024. And I'm going to start taking you guys through the book of Judges. And we're on a pretty good track here because the study that I've been doing for my Serpent by the Way series and my biblical kind of timeline as we go through the Bible are kind of starting to line up here. So a lot of the research that I'm doing is going to be doubling over and helping get some context about what's going on in the book of Judges and Samuel and stuff like that, what's going on in the surrounding world as I'm trying to piece that together. But I'm going to take you guys through the book of Judges, and I'm not going to do it I'm going to do it in its chronological order versus the book order, just because there's some things you need to know about the book of Judges that aren't going to make sense if you think it's just a straightforward chronology. So it's mostly a straightforward chronology, but you have some additions at the end. First of all, when you start in the beginning of the book, I would advise you to go and read the end of Joshua first, and then read the beginning of Judges and see where they overlap. So Joshua at the end, you're going to get, I think from about Joshua 13 to the end of the book, so 13 to 24, you're going to get to all this stuff about the inheritance and the division of the land. And there's going to be a couple stories in there. One is going to be about how Caleb gets the land of Hebron. The other is going to be about how the Danites get the city of Laish or Lashem and rename it Dan. Okay, now that stuff happens pretty early. Obviously, Othniel is Caleb's. He's either his grandnephew or nephew. It looks like he's his nephew. It calls him his little brother twice, but if you look at the genealogies in First Chronicles, it's clear that he is possibly a grandson of his. So we'll get into that when we read that passage. The other thing is the story of Dan taking Lashem is in Joshua. Let's see, it's in Joshua 19. But when you get into the book of Judges, you're going to see it tacked on to the end. And the reason is somebody added this narrative after the captivity. And so if you go to Judges 18 where the story starts, it's actually going to start with this guy named Micah. Before that, there's a man in Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah. And it's going to talk about this guy who basically sets up a counterfeit priesthood in his house. And then he gets Moses' grandson to be his priest. And Moses' grandson apparently is coming from Bethlehem in Judah. And this is going to be in Mount Ephraim where this takes place. And you're going to be somewhere around where the Ark of the Tabernacle is kept, because Joshua's from Ephraim, and that's where that is. And that guy's going to build an idol, and then the Danites are going to come along and they're going to take the idol, and then they're going to offer that priest to be the priest of Dan. And the priest, you're going to see, if you read your King James, by the time you get to the end of chapter 18, it says that the Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, it's actually Moses. This is supposed to be Moses. The Jews admitted changing it because they didn't want to profane the name of Moses, because it's a descendant of Moses who ends up starting a counterfeit Jewish priesthood with the Danites. I have a theory that possibly becomes the Greek oracles and the Druids and possibly the Freemasons and things like that later. But that's just a theory. Obviously, it would be loosely knit together. These guys certainly have a cult that spreads among the Greeks, and I'm going to try to track that down. So the Danites basically set up this graven image, and the descendant of Moses is going to be their priest. But the thing you want to note when we get to the story is that this guy is a young man when this happens. Okay, so if Moses' grandson is a young man, and remember Moses is 120 by the time they enter in the Promised Land. he's got sons that he had between when he was between 40 and 80, which means if one of those sons has a son, let's say he has a son when he's 40, well, he's a young man. This has got to be within 20, maybe 30 years of them entering in the promised land when this happens. Well, when you read the story, it talks about them not having an inheritance, and then they go to Mount Ephraim, and they go to Dan, and they overtake the children of Dan. And it says they kill everybody there, and they sack the city. And then it says they name it after Dan, their father. And then it says that Moses, remember this descendant of Moses and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. So the only way that could have been written is after the captivity. So I would assume that Judges 18 and basically Judges 18 through the end of the book, because this other story is going to be about how they almost wipe out the Benjamites. That's going to take place right after they enter into the land. But these two stories seem to be added after the captivity. And so when you get down to this next story, when they talk about how the Danites have some Sodom and Gomorrahite rapey people in their town, and they rape this woman to death, and then he cuts his wife up and sends her to all the tribes to basically say, what are you guys going to do about this? And then they almost completely wipe out the Danites, or the Benjamites. That seems to happen within one generation, because you still have Phinehas being the priest. And Phinehas becomes the high priest really right after the conquest of Joshua. So he's alive in the book of Numbers, so we know, he was obviously, one of the younger generation. He's going to be Aaron's grandson, and he's going to come into the promised land, but his dad's going to be the priest during the days of Joshua. So I forget what Phinehas' dad's name, but he's going to die then right after Joshua dies, and then Phinehas is going to be the priest. So you're looking at him as an old man, but you're probably looking at 30, 40 years till when that happens. So this thing with Dan and this thing with Benjamin happened in the immediate first generation, and you need to tie that back to the beginning of the story. So that's what we're going to do here. So we're just going to start at the beginning of the book, and I'm going to take you guys through some chronological stuff and some stuff that's going on in world history around this. So if you read these, and this is, if you read your secular timelines, and you're going to find, especially if you ever went to like a secular university and studied history, you're going to find it very frustrating how obvious the Hebrews are there, but like they pretend they're not. And so when I went to university, I kind of studied a history degree. They would talk about these people called the Haparu or the Habaru people who invaded Canaan, and they're just it's like your scholars just don't want to see the Bible. And it's like there's such a stubbornness where these people are like, hey, there's these mysterious people who just came into Canaan and started attacking all the Canaanites, and they're called like the Habaru or the Haparu. Well, everybody knows back then that these guys didn't have vowels in their words, okay? And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make the phonetics sound like, okay, you have HBR. So HBR and then something that signifies a oo sound. Okay, Hebrew. But instead they're like Haparu or Habaru, and they're like, well, this is how, these Canaanites or these Philistines or whatever would have pronounced it. And then they're like, but we don't know who these people are. They're the Hebrews, dude. Why are you so stupid? And I would go through undergrad, and they would just keep being this retarded and just pretending like it's not the Hebrews. They come in at the exact time the Hebrews come in. They wipe out everything. These guys are sending letters to the Egyptians saying, help, help, these Hebrews are coming and taking over everything. And meanwhile, you have, at the exact same time, you have these Hyksos who rule Egypt, and they're estimating from 1650 to 1550 BC, okay? That's literally the century. The Jews are in Egypt a little over 200 years. It's probably like 220, maybe 230. I've seen estimates as low as 210, okay? And for the first 100 years, because of Joseph and his brothers and Jacob and them being all famous, they're ruling Egypt. They're ruling Egypt as basically kind of like a state of Egypt. If Egypt was a country and they're a state within the country, they're ruling Avaris, which is the center of Goshen, okay? And they're sending out sea trade, and they're clearly going back and forth between Canaan and not Carchemish, but Haran, and you're just going back and forth between that region, and they're ruling. They're even fighting battles and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden they're not ruling anymore. But they're still there. We know they're still there, but they're not ruling anymore. Well, Hyksos just means foreign hill people or foreign shepherd kings or something like that, and it's the Hebrews. Okay, so this is another thing. It's like, why are you so retarded? I don't know. We got pictures of these guys with coats with many colors, and they're clearly shepherds, and they're sacrificing animals and stuff like that, and they just have the exact same haircuts that we would know that the Israelites would have had and stuff like that. But it's not them. How do you know? Well, reasons. Like, they just don't want to admit that the Bible's true. But if you start getting into the phonetics and you start getting into the etymology of the different languages and all the different people groups around, everything in the Bible's right. It's always right. And these scholars who try to get on and try to line this up with Egyptology or with the Assyrian records or whatever, and try to say it's not the Hebrews, they just play dumb. I don't know any other way to say it. So anyways, you've got these people here. This is when the Jews before they came slaves, and then you got the century after this, after they become slaves. Okay, now they come out of Egypt. They're not slaves for that long. You got to remember, they enslaved them, and then they keep growing. So you've got like maybe 40, 50 years of them being slaves, but they keep growing, and so they kill all the firstborn. And it's in that generation that Moses is born. And Moses is 80 when he comes out. So it's 80 plus whatever amount of time between them making slaves and them killing the firstborn. There you go. Well, how much is that time? It's about 100 years. It's not that long, okay? And so you have these estimates of 1650 to 1550. Well, guess when the Jews come out? 1490, okay? So you've got 60 years after that. So what you find with these estimates is they're all within about 40, 50 years of the biblical record, okay? And remember, these are estimates, okay? Now, they're going to use a combination of carbon dating and different historical events to do this, and every now and then they're going to fix dates to things in the geological record, and that's where they start to screw up, okay? So what they'll do is they're gonna find stuff in the geological record. They're never going to admit the flood, and when they do that, then they go, oh, well, wow, these civilizations are supposed to come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. And I'm reading this stuff, and I'm telling you, I'm reading stuff on all these known civilizations, all around Turkey, all around the Middle East. I mean, I'm literally reading the Wikipedia articles and stuff like this on every single one I find. And what you find over and over and over again is some mysterious civilization collapse that happens in the century of the flood. Well, all that's going to happen is you're going to have all these civilizations get destroyed from the flood, but their foundations are still there. And so these guys are just going to go dig up the foundation and rebuild on them. And that's all they're doing. They're rebuilding on cities that were there before the flood, okay, as they get more populated. So when you get to Göbekli Tepe, not Göbekli Tepe, when you get there, they're just probably digging stuff up that was already there, okay? They're not building. People are like, ooh, this mysterious thing, who built this? They know where Noah and his sons know where all the big cities were, and they know where all the center points were for everything when they when the flood happens. And so after the flood, they go back and they find where stuff was, and they're back in the plain of Shinar. Well, why are they up in the mountains building the ark? And the answer is because it was all war. The Bible said the whole earth was violent, okay, and that's why he destroyed it. So you're not going to be down in the plains where people are fighting over everything all the time. You're going to go up into the mountains where it's safe, right? And that's what they do. They go up in the mountains where it's safe, and you've got what this is, I think it's called Lake Van. And it's right in the middle of Turkey, and it's surrounded by mountains. And surprise, that's where the ark rests. And they found evidence that the ark wasn't just being tossed all around, it was anchored. So the ark was basically had these big stone anchors around it, and he's like, you're going to flood the earth and it's going to go up. And the waves would literally, they know how the ark was designed, the waves would pump fresh air in and out of the ark, okay? And then it would go down, and where would it go down? Right where they had it, okay? So it'd come to rest where they are. They're in the mountains of Ararat, and here's this lake up here. And so what are they doing? They're getting away from the prime territory that everybody's fighting over, and they're going up in the mountains, and they're making this ark, okay? And this is where this civilization is going to be where a kingdom named Urartu is going to be built later, which is just Ararat. Urartu is just a transliteration of Ararat, okay? And so there's a kingdom of Ararat, and I believe Riphath, the son of Gomer, is having the kingdom, and I believe Riphath is Rosh, because there's literally like 4 or 5 kings in this dynasty named Russia. It's Rusha, Russia or Russia. There's like Russia the first, the second, third, fourth, fifth, okay? And then this kingdom gets destroyed, and by I think it's the Assyrians or the Medes take it over, and then 1,000 years later, where you have the other Ripheans go, which is the Riphean Mountains, which is the Urals, you have these people called the Kievan Rus show up, or the Rosh people show up. And what I think that is probably the remnants from here. These guys, took over their stuff, and they're never going to get it back, and they probably just migrated over, and they knew they were royalty, and they probably restarted a royal dynasty over here among the other people that were with them, just like people just tend to do when their civilizations get destroyed. They move somewhere else and start over, and they know who the OGs were, and they know who the heirs were, and all of a sudden, you have like 1,000 years later, these Kievan Rus show up, okay? So that's one thing I discovered. But the point is when you read about all these things, and I mean, I'm reading about all the little civilizations here, they all align with the biblical record. If you read, what you do is you have records of, in the pre-flood area, wars, overthrows, right? And they're like, we can't figure out these people, we can't figure out these language, but everything they have that has in terms of writing is languages that are after the Tower of Babel. And so they have all these languages that are after the Tower of Babel that are calling things similar things but different, okay? And literally, they're just like, I mean, you read this thing and you can't believe how daft they are. It's like, these guys got a god named Ishtar. These guys have got a god named Ashtoreth. This guy's got a god named Ashtoreth. These guys got a god named Inanna. They know it's all the same person. And then this other one who's right here has a god named Ishara. And they're like, we don't know who this is. Maybe it's related to Ishtar. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like you're 50 miles away from people who have a god named Asherah, and 50 miles north of that you got guys named Ishara, and you can't figure out that it's the same person. The things these people do because they don't want to admit the Bible is true is just like, it's a delusion, okay? So they deny the flood, they deny the Tower of Babel, and then they deny everything having to do with the Hebrews, okay? Like the amount of stuff they're suppressing to clarify this knowledge, and I'm going to tell you, this is all going to come out in my book because I'm just going to interpret all this. It's very clear. Before the flood, you had tons of wars, and you just have overthrows happening all over here because this is where human civilization started. Eden, I believe, was down here in the Persian Gulf when it's flooded. I believe it says there's these 4 rivers that go out from it, but it doesn't mean it flows out and downhill from it. It just means if you take the river, you're going to go out of Eden, okay? And it says it goes into water, it goes out of Eden to water the whole land of Eden. So what happens? You have these rivers that flow downhill to here, and somehow, I don't know if you have a lake in the middle, I don't know what it's like, but you're going to have these 4 rivers here that water this land, and it's lush, and it's a valley, and it's low, and then people are going to come out from there, and it looks like they're primarily around the Middle East. It looks like they're all kind of together around the Middle East. Now, you have 1,600 years, so they probably spread civilizations around the world, but this is still where the majority of them are, okay? And then you get into the period before the flood, and you would just have fighting. And, of course, we don't have any historical records in the Bible about this period, except it was just filled with violence. But we know that Cain built a city east of Eden, so that would be with Iran, okay? And then we know that people keep spreading. The wickedness got worse. We know there were Nephilim and all that stuff back in those days, and it's like, well, where were the Nephilim? Maybe they're in the same place the Nephilim were after the flood. We don't know. But the point is we have all these cities getting overthrown back and forth, and then all of a sudden we have this period, and I forget what they call it, but it's like they call it the archival period or something like that. Okay, well, what does that mean? It means everything got destroyed. It's literally everything got frozen in place. Everything got frozen in place and destroyed. What happened? Well, it's the archival period. It's the flood, dude. It's the flood destroyed everything, smushed everything down in the mud, and anything you have in terms of archaeological records seem to show that it was before the flood. And cuneiform may have been being used before the flood because it's a pretty simple system, and if everyone was speaking the same language, why would you not keep using the same system, the same writing system? So maybe you have cuneiform records of what was before the flood, or maybe you have people interpreting the records of what's before the flood. But what we know happened based on the historical records is you have people starting to deny the flood within 500 years of the flood. And they're starting to tell this false story about how there was this ship that came down from heaven, and that's where these gods came from, and how they're the king, and they're part God, and they're descended from the gods, when they're really just like third generation from Noah, and just trying to talk crap so they can have people worship them as a god. And they're telling the younger generations lies, and they're not telling them about the flood, and they're just saying that this ship that you can literally go see up in the mountains came down from heaven. Okay? We have this in Sumerian records, and it's like, well, why are they saying this? Well, Josephus is telling you how there's 3 or 4 historians around in this area who give you account of where the ark was, and then they said, but then people just eventually took chunks of it to make amulets and stuff like this. You know how people are with their sacred objects. You could be like, oh, that's toilet paper that Jesus used, and somebody's going to go put it in a glass vase and start praying to it. Well, that's what they did with the ark. People just started taking pieces of it, like the Berlin Wall or something like that, as souvenirs, and until it was gone. And why wouldn't you? You're like, this is where all the people came from. And we have this story that it came from heaven, so it's like space material. And so we're going to take a piece of it, and it's got magical powers, and people just took pieces of it until it was gone. Okay? So now you have the people of Avaris right here. And Avaris is basically, I don't know if it's Tanis here. I don't know if that's the city. But it's right around here. And they're going to come out of there exactly when they say, and what the Egyptians are going to do is they're going to lie and say they expelled them out of there instead of they took all our stuff and left. Okay? Because that's embarrassing, and you don't want that in your historical records if you're trying to convince everybody you're God kings, right? And we know the Egyptians lie. We keep going back to the Egyptian records and try to force the Bible to meet the Egyptian records when we know the Egyptians lie. We know they erase people from history. We know they're going to spin stuff. We know they're claiming to be gods, so you know they're going to lie. Okay? So if you know they're going to lie, you don't weight history. You don't weight history in the favor of the guy who's claiming to be God. You weight history in the favor of the guy who's claiming not to be God and just telling normal human stories. And if you read the Bible, it's normal human stories. Yes, there's miracles in those stories, but they're acknowledged as miracles. They're not saying, because Abraham was a god, he just flew. Where you have these other stories where you have, because he was a god, he flew up and grabbed the sun, and then he came back and put the sun in our temple, and then our temple is now this eternal flame. How come the sun's still there? This is the kind of stuff they have, and yet people will look at their history and be like, well, but their accounting of historical dates and wars and who won and who lost is definitely accurate, No, it's stupid. They lie. So you go, okay, well, when are they saying they expelled the Jews? I don't know, right at the exact same time the Jews leave Egypt? They expelled the Hyksos right when the Hebrews left. That's interesting. And then what you have is, you have them coming over here, and then we know we have they're called the Amanra letters. We know Egypt's getting letters back and forth from these guys saying, help us, Egypt, because this was all a vassalage of Egypt before that. Immediately before the Hebrews came in, this was a vassalage of Egypt. They were paying tribute to Egypt, and basically their enforcement wing was the Philistines, because they're an Egyptian tribe. Okay, and they're paying tribute to them. But all of a sudden, these other people are coming in and take them over, and they're writing to Egypt saying, help us. These Haparu people, definitely not Hebrew people, are taking over everything. They're just coming in. There's tons of them, and just help us. Why aren't you helping us? And Egypt's just like, they're going to write in their historical records, to my glory, I went and defeated them, and I destroyed everything, and destroyed all these people, and I took over this, and I won all these great battles, and blah, blah, blah. And your historians are going to be like, so we know the Hebrews weren't there because Egypt went and took over the land and destroyed everybody back then. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. For one, they lost all their firstborn 50 years before, so their inheritance and their lineage and their government is essentially a mess. They lost all their money 50 years ago, and they lost their armies 50 years ago. Now, you can rebuild your armies pretty quick, but are you going to come back and like try to fight the people that just kicked the crap out of you with their God 50 years ago? No, you're not. You're going to wait a minute. And they don't try to attack Israel until after the days of Solomon. That's the first time they try to attack Israel. And it's just like they just go in there and raid and pillage really quick and then leave. Okay? So you're going to have the Jews come in here. They're going to take over everything, just like Joshua says. They're going to go in. They're going to destroy Jericho. And surprise, Jericho falls just around that time. You're going to have historians say, oh, yeah, the Egyptians destroyed. No, they didn't. The Egyptians did not destroy Jericho. Some people that came from Egypt destroyed Jericho, called Haparu, but maybe to some foreign people somewhere they said, well, those are Egyptians because they've been in Egypt for hundreds of years and, they're Egyptian. Well, no, they're not an Egyptian tribe. They're the Hebrews. And they're going to come in, they're going to destroy Jericho, and then the king of Jebus, which they're going to call Jerusalem because it was edited later, is going to gather a bunch of people, and they're going to try to fight him, and then they're going to beat all those guys, and they're basically going to have taken the highlands, okay? And then they're going to go from the highlands, they're going to take all the surrounding lowlands right outside the mountains. They're not going to clear out the Amalekites from the Negev. They're not going to take out the Philistines. But then they're going to go to the north, and they're going to really go up to this Hazor, which is they're going to lead an alliance up here. And the king of Hazor is going to lead all these people probably to the Valley of Armageddon. That's probably where it takes place. And you're going to have all these armies that are going to come from as far away as the Hittites and stuff like that. And they're going to all these kings from around here. And it's not just going to be them. It's going to be whatever mercenaries or cousins or whatever they can get from abroad. And they're going to try to fight Joshua, and they're going to have one big battle, and Joshua's going to kick their butts. And then Joshua's going to be like, okay, I'm done. He's going to do all that over the course of about 5 years. Okay? And then once they do all that, Joshua's going to split up the land. They're going to basically, the big tribes are going to take what's theirs, and then they're going to cast lots for the little stuff for what's left. And what you're going to end up with is basically everybody taking their land after that. And they're supposed to now, all the big enemies have been destroyed. You still got some holdouts. You still got some strong kingdoms from a local perspective, but you don't have anyone who can form a big alliance against them, okay? And basically their marching orders is now you go clear out your land of all these smaller kingdoms and stuff like that, and city-states, and then you're going to live happily ever after in your land. You just don't worship their idols or marry their women and start worshiping their idols, or just like let them live and start worshiping their idols, or like just make a deal with them and start worshiping their idols, okay? Just don't worship their idols and you'll be fine. So what do? Well, they worship their idols. And that brings us into the book of Judges. And what people are going to tell you is everything was hunky-dory until Joshua died, until the elders who were with him died, okay? So, well, the elders who came into the land with Joshua would have probably been in their 50s, and Joshua was in his 90s. Remember, these people were all under 20 in the 40-year period, and Joshua and Caleb were the only ones who were adults who back then, or considered grown-ups back then, were still there. The rest of them are teenagers. So those guys are still all going to be in their 50s and 60s, and that means over the next 20, 30 years, they're all going to die like normal people die. People are living to be normal 70, 80 years now, okay? And so you're going to have Joshua die, and you're going to imagine, okay, Joshua dies 20 years into the promised land. I think he is 110 when he dies, so God gives him supernatural long life. When somebody lives to be over 100, it's a special grace from God, because most people die 70 to 80. That's just the average around the world. If you live beyond 80, you've either had very good life circumstances or it's just a blessing from God, okay? If you live over 100, it's like I had a grandma that lived to be, I think, like 104 or 107, her great-grandma, okay? My grandparents both lived to be almost 90. My grandpa was a doctor, and he smoked until he was almost 90. Somehow it worked, okay? And then my grandma lived to be almost 90 after him. So So it still happens, but it's not common, and these guys have pretty rough lives. So you're going to see David, who's fighting wars and stuff his whole life, and he's going to be dead by I think before he hits 80, or maybe about when he hits 80. He's going to die pretty young because he's been fighting wars his whole life, and that's what these guys have been doing too. They've been wandering around, they've been fighting wars. Their joints are achy. They're just going to get old and die. And so you're going to look at about 20 years deep when things start going awry there. Okay, maybe 30. So it says, now after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, who shall go up against us to fight the Canaanites first, to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have delivered the land into his hand. So remember how Jacob sets up Judah, and he's going to say the king is going to come from you. God is setting up Judah as being a dominant tribe in the land of Israel, and the other one is going to be Joseph, because those are the two that it's basically ordained that kings are going to come from. Okay. Jacob is going to talk about Joseph, which is Ephraim. That's going to be his younger son who's going to prevail against the older. And then Judah becoming the main two. Okay? And then they're both going to merge together in the line of Christ. Now, it says, and Judah said to Simon, his brother, come up with me into my lot and come to fight against the Canaanites, and I likewise will go up to you. And Simeon went with them. So let's get our map of Judea up here. So we're in southern Israel here. Shiloh is where the Ark of the Covenant is. I think Joshua dies near Bethel, or it might be in the area right around here. And basically the main point that they're going to, whenever they meet and conglomerate for something, have a meeting, they do it at the Ark with the priest there, and the priest gives their sacrifices, and they pray for God's guidance. And that's going to be around Shiloh, okay? And basically, first things first is Judah. They've conquered all of this up here, okay? But all of this down here is really their territory, okay? This stuff that you see Edom here, they're going to be fighting with these people until the days of David, okay? And then they're pretty much have it all subdued. But all the land of the Philistines, the Amalekites, all this stuff is all belongs to Israel, okay? And so they're going to come from up here, and they're going to say, let's go take all this down here, okay? So it says, and Judah went up and delivered the Canaanites and Perizzites in their hand, and they slew of them at Bezek 10,000 men, and they found Adonai Bezek, and they fought against them and slew the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Now we've got Bezek here, which is in northern Israel, so I don't think that's the right Bezek. But it says, and Adonai Bezek fled, and they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and his great toes. And it says, and Adonai Bezek said, 70 kings have I, having their thumbs and their toes cut off, gathered their meat from under my table, as I have done, so God hath requited me. So apparently he killed 70 kings, and those, like, he was a tough guy, and he killed these kings and make them cut off their fingers and toes and make them with grab food from under his table to eat. Like, he just humiliated them until they died. And he said they brought him to Jerusalem, and there he died. Now you're going to see this in Joshua and Judges, and this is how you're going to know it's edited. Okay, Jerusalem isn't called Jerusalem yet. It's not going to be called Jerusalem until David takes it. It's called Jebus. It used to be called Salem. Then the Jebusites took it over and called it Jebus, and then David's going to take it over and call it Jerusalem again. Okay, so that's why I think Melchizedek was Shem. Okay, I think he was there, and the Jebusites came and ran him out, and basically renamed the city Jebus. I think that's what happened, and so they know that, and that's why they're going to keep the name Salem in it, because I think the Semites are back, and I think they know that the priesthood is basically taking over for that original Melchizedek priesthood. Okay. And it says, now the children of Judah had fought against Jerusalem and taken it and smitten it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. And afterwards the children of Judah went down and to fight against the Canaanites and dwelt in the mountain in the south, in the valley. Now, I think personally, because they're saying Adonai Bezek, okay? Well, there was a guy in Jerusalem named Adonai Zedek that Joshua kills, okay? So this is probably the guy that replaces that guy. Okay, so because they never take Jerusalem, they never take Jebus, it says. Okay, so it's saying that basically they pursued him, caught him, and cut off his hands and his toes, And then it says they took him back to Jerusalem, and there he died. So they apparently just cut off his fingers and toes and let him go. I don't understand this, but they don't take Jerusalem during these days. So then it says, now the children of Judah had fought against Jerusalem, now the children of Judah had fought against Jerusalem and taken it and smitten it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. So apparently they do take it and they destroy it, but the Jebusites come back, because later on it's going to say that they weren't able to displace the Jebusites from Jerusalem, okay? So apparently, I would assume that Adonai-Bezek is probably Adonai-Zedek Jr. It just literally means Lord of Bezek, and it says they fought Adonai-Bezek in Bezek. I just don't understand this here. There's stories that overlap between Joshua and Judges, and it makes me wonder if that's the same guy, and then he migrates to Jerusalem or whatever happens. I'm not sure, but they're saying they took him to Jerusalem and he died, and the children of Judah fought against Jerusalem and took it and smote it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. Okay, but then why are they not there? This doesn't make sense to me. Like, why don't they keep it? Because Jerusalem is part of Benjamin's territory. They apparently took it, but it seems like the Jebusites are still there, and there's still populous numbers of them, and so they just rebuild it. Okay, it says, and afterwards the children of Judah went and fought against the Canaanites that dwelt in the mountains in the south and in the valley, and Judah went against the Canaanites and dwelt in Hebron. Now this kind of makes me think this is Adonai-Zedek, okay? Because if you read about Adonai-Zedek, the king of Jerusalem, he's going to gather all these armies to fight him. And he says, Hohem, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. And they get their butts kicked by Joshua. This is the second big battle he has, okay? So probably Adonai-Bezek is either, Bezek is another city, and they're lord of that city. He's lord of that city, or they're related. But it seems like they're both Jebusites. So it says they fought against them and they slew the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Canaanites and the Perizzites would have been up here north a little bit. I don't know. So it's a kind of confusing story, and there might have been some... we know there's editing in the record. We also know we're going to find sometimes when we're reading the Old Testament, they're going to have multiple spellings of things and sometimes just get things wrong. This is why you're going to have differences in some places in the Samaritan Pentateuch, in the Septuagint, in the Masoretic text. I'm not standing on the fact, just like I don't stand on the KJV or the ESV as the perfect Bible. I'm not going to stand on King James only or critical text. I'm not going to stand on the Masoretic or the Samaritan Pentateuch or the Septuagint being the one true Old Testament, okay? I'm going to say sometimes they got this wrong, sometimes they got that wrong, sometimes this one's better, sometimes that one's better, okay? You just have to look at the different information and figure out which makes sense. The fact that Moses is the father of the guy in Dan who starts the false priesthood is in the Septuagint, and I believe it's in the Samaritan Pentateuch, but not in the Masoretic, okay? So sometimes the Masoretic's better, sometimes the Septuagint's better. You just have to figure this stuff out, okay? So then it says, and afterwards the children of Judah went to fight against the Canaanites who dwelt in the mountain and in the south and in the valley, okay? So there, remember, this is a whole bunch of mountains up here, okay? And you're going to have a whole bunch of little cities and stuff like that, and a lot of them are fortified in these mountains. So it's going to take them some time to destroy them all and completely displace these people, okay? But they're going to go down and they're going to get the main ones first, because then all those other cities have to trade with those cities and come there, and their supply chain is kind of just cut off, okay? So then it says, and then Judah went to the Canaanites that dwell in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron before was Kiriath Arba, okay? This is another way you can tell that it's edited overwards. They're going to keep calling it Kiriath Arba and going back and forth and calling it Hebron before it's called Kiriath Arba. And it's not called Hebron until Othniel takes it, okay? Or Caleb and Othniel take it, okay? I think Melchizedek is Shem, and I think Hebron could have been named after Heber. I could be wrong, because there are somebody is going to actually have a son named Hebron. And it might be named after that son, but the timing doesn't seem to line up. So it's called Hebron in Genesis, and either they're backtracking and editing Genesis, or it was once called Hebron, and then it gets changed to Kiriath Arba when the Arba is going to be the one of the Anakim. Okay, so the sons of Anak, one of them is Arba, or it might be the father, one of the two things. Okay. And so it definitely does get, it could be changed from Hebron to Kiriath Arba. But when you get into Chronicles, you see Caleb, the brother of Jeremiel, Mesha, his firstborn, was the father of Ziph, and the sons of Marishah, the father of Hebron. Okay? And the sons of Hebron, Korah, Tapua. So there was a guy in Caleb's lineage named Hebron, but you're talking about Caleb, the brother of Jeremiah. Let's see, Mesha's firstborn, father of Ziph, the father of Marishah. You're talking about 4 or 5 generations later. So does he name him Hebron because the city's named Hebron, or does he name the city Hebron after him? Well, we don't know. We know it's called, 5 generations later is kind of a lot. That's like a couple hundred years later. But we have it called Hebron in Genesis. Again, that could be back editing, or it could be it was conquered by the Anakim, and then the Anakim changed the name to Kiriath Arba, and then they changed it back to Hebron. Or it could have always been Kiriath Arba, and then they were just back noting it to that in Genesis, and it's named after Hebron, his great-great-grandson. Okay? I'm going to tend towards the belief that it was originally Hebron, named after Heber, and Hebron is maybe a transliteration of the name Hebrew. We don't know. But you have these people called the Hebrews, and they're descended from a guy named Heber. And then you have a place that they conquer, and they name it Hebron. So I feel like it has to do with the name Heber. Could be wrong. I'm willing to hear arguments either way. I just haven't nailed that down yet. So, so it says, Caleb said, so it says, and Judah went in against the Canaanites that dwelled in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron before was Kiriath Arba, and they slew Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai. Okay? Now in Joshua 14 it says, Joshua blessed him and gave Caleb the son of Jephunneh Hebron for an inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. And that is in First Chronicles. It talks about the lineage of Caleb. He's a Judahite, and Kenaz is in that lineage. And it looks like, let's see, Kenaz. You see the sons of Caleb of Jephunneh, Uru, Allah, Nam, even Elah, even Kenaz. Okay? Now, it looks like Caleb has a son named Kenaz, and here it says he's the son of Kenaz. Okay? The sons of Kenaz, Othniel, Sariah. This is why you just have to acknowledge there's mistakes in the Bible in terms of these genealogical records. And these mistakes, remember, they're going from Proto-Hebrew to Aramaic script when they're writing this. And so some of this could literally just be, okay, how we translate it in the English, this would have made sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to us, okay? But I mean, you have Kenaz, it says the son of Kenaz is Othniel. Remember, he has a brother named Othniel. It says his little brother. And this could be where they're getting that he's the son of Kenaz. But if you look down the line, it's going to say Caleb has a son named Kenaz, okay? So I don't hold to such a level of divine inspiration that I say, okay, they're both true. What people will do to say they're both true is like, oh, that's just because there's names missing. So even though it says Caleb, let's see. So you have in the sons of Kenaz, Othniel, Sariah, and Hathath. And you have Caleb, the brother whose brother was Shua, begat Mahir, who was the father of Eshton, and Eshton begat Bethaphron and Tephina, and these are the men of Rakah and the sons of Kenaz. So in other words, he's saying his Caleb's brother begat the sons of Kenaz, Othniel, Sariah, and the sons of Othniel, Hahath. Okay, so he's saying these were all descended from Caleb's brother. Okay, well, could they have a common ancestor named Kenaz before that? Maybe, but he's not listed anywhere. Okay, and when we have quite a bit of records from Judah, both from Numbers and from Genesis, and we just don't have Caleb being descended from a guy named Kenaz. We have Caleb the son of Jephunneh. Okay, so is Jephunneh another name for Kenaz? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe somebody made a mistake, and I think people make mistakes. I think people in very old records make mistakes, and people get the picture because we know who these people are. They all descended from Kenaz, and who's Kenaz? Well, he's probably Caleb's nephew, and then Othniel is his son, so that would make Caleb like his grandnephew. And that makes sense to me because Caleb is 80, and this guy, he's getting some younger guy to say, who wants to come marry my daughter? Okay, and it makes sense that it would be his grandnephew and not his brother if he's 80, okay? So anyways, it says, Judah went in the Canaanites who dwell in Hebron, and it says they slew Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai. That's referring to the tribes, not the people, because it talks about Joshua killing those people. Okay? And then it says, and they went from there against the inhabitants of Debir, and the name of Debir was Kiriath Sepher. And Caleb said, he that smites Kiriath Sepher and takes it, I will give him Achsah, my daughter, to wife. This same story is in Joshua, and Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it and gave it to him to Achsah to wife. Again, when you see some of these stories that are in two different places, there's a reason for it, okay? Remember, Joshua is going to be, that's probably a family record from the house of Joshua, and I'm leaning towards the belief that the book of the wars of the Lord is Joshua, okay? Because when it talks about the book of the wars of the Lord, it talks about these things that they're going to put in there, and all three of those things are in Joshua at the end of Joshua when he talks about it. So it seems like he's telling Joshua to keep a record of these wars that the Lord fights for us, and the whole book of Joshua is that, okay? But there's no record of anything being in the book of the wars of the Lord outside of those things Moses mentions, and they're in Joshua, okay? So I think Joshua was originally called the book of the wars of the Lord, and then they named it Joshua because Joshua wrote it, for the most part, okay? And then some people polished it off after he died. Judges is different because Judges seems to have been written by Samuel, who's the last of the judges and the first of the prophets, and going to anoint the first king. And so he is accounting this period between Joshua and the first kings, and it's got an entirely different theme and narrative to it, okay? Joshua is about the conquest of the land at the hand of the Lord. This is about the ups and downs of Israel while not having a king and not obeying the law, okay? And so it says, and it came to pass, when she came to him, she was moved to ask her father for a field, and she lighted off her ass, and she got up off her donkey. And Caleb said to her, what wilt thou? And he said to her, give me a blessing, for thou hast given me south land. Okay, so they're down here in the Negev. And he says, give me some upper and lower springs. And so he's like, some upper springs and nether springs. And the children of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up to the city of palm trees, and the children of Judah into the wilderness of Judah, which lies south of Arad, and they dwelt among those people. So here's Arad. And so you're going to have, there's Debir. This is where Caleb's going to be. This is where Othniel is going to be. And then they're going to get some upper and lower springs, okay? And it says, and Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they slew the Canaanites that dwelled in Zephath, and utterly destroyed it, and the name of the city was called Hormah. So let's see what Hormah is. So Hormah's down here in the south, somewhere around here. It's not in that map. And Judah took Gaza with the coast thereof, and Ashkelon with the coast thereof, and Ekron with the coast thereof. So what happened? How did the Philistines make a comeback? I don't know, because it's saying they're taking all the coasts of this, all the regions of this, okay? It's when they say Gaza, Gaza is a city, Ashkelon is a city, and Ekron is a city. So it's saying they took all these cities. So did they destroy them and then they rebuilt? Probably. And what probably happened is they got reinforcements from the Egyptians and from Crete, where the Philistines were, and they rebuilt. Okay, that would be my guess. We do know the Philistines are going to make a comeback because the Jews fail, and we do know the Egyptians claim to have gone up and taken Canaan in that time, so probably the Egyptians helped the Philistines. They make a little bit of a comeback, okay? Then it says, the Lord was with Judah, and he drave out the inhabitants of the mountain, but they could not drive out... Okay, this is where your atheists are going to have a problem with this, okay? It says, the Lord was with Judah, and he drove out the inhabitants of the mountain, but could not drive out the inhabitants of Judah because they had chariots of iron, okay? It's not saying the Lord could not drive him out. It's saying the Lord was with Judah, and he drove out the inhabitants of the mountains, but then the Judahites couldn't drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had chariots of iron. Well, it's not saying the Lord was with them and they still couldn't do it, okay? We're going to find out later that they got into idolatry and stuff like that, and that's why they can't do it, okay? So then it says, and they gave Hebron to Caleb, as Moses said, and he expelled thence the sons of Anak, and the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabited Jerusalem, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day, okay? So this is how you know this was written in the days of Samuel, because it says to this day. They're calling it Jerusalem. They probably, again, we know they're not dwelling there in the captivity, and it says to this day. Maybe they know it should be called Jerusalem, and they're just calling it Jerusalem, or they're going back and back adding it, but they're saying to this day. Well, when did the Jebusites get overthrown and Jerusalem gets taken from them? Is in the days of David. Okay, so. This could be Samuel or some later prophet that's doing it, but it's clearly written much afterwards, okay? And then it says, in the house of Joseph, they also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And it says, the house of Joseph sent to descry Bethel. Now, the name of the city before was Luz. This is weird because it's called Luz. It says, but he called the name of the place that Bethel, but the name of the city was called Luz at the first, okay? I don't know if it gets taken back over and renamed Luz because they're saying that Jacob called it Luz, and now they're saying that Joseph calls it Luz. So I don't know what happened there. He said, and the spies saw a man come forth from the city, and they said to him, show us and we pray thee the entrance of the city, and we will show you mercy. And he showed them the entrance of the city, and they smote the city with the edge of the sword, and they let the man go with his family. And the man went into the land of the Hittites and built a city and called it Luz. Okay? So let's see if we have a city named Luz now. Outside of Bethel. So it looks like we just have Bethel, and the land of the Hittites could have been... Oh, this will be interesting. Among the Hittites, there's a language called the Luwian language. I think it's Lud, but I wonder if it could be Luz. I doubt it, though. Then it says, neither did Manasseh drive out the inhabitants of Beth-Shean or Tanakh. So let's see where these guys are. So there's Beth-Shean and Tanakh. So they didn't drive them out. Or its towns, or the inhabitants of Dor with its towns. There, it's over here on the coast. Or Ibleam and her towns, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and her towns, but the Canaanites dwell in the land. So in other words, Manasseh is pretty strong, but they're much stronger over here. You're going to find a bunch of guys of the judges coming over here, and this other half tribe is not so strong. And apparently the Canaanites are still dwelling all up in Ehud, and they are probably getting these lower parts. And it says, it came to pass when Israel was strong that they put the Canaanites to tribute, and they didn't utterly drive them out. Okay, this is stupid. You don't put them to tribute. Why? What happened when Egypt put you to slavery and tribute? We just kept growing, okay? So we don't want them to keep growing and getting stronger and bide their time, building up their resources to fight us later. Well, they're stupid, okay? Neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites that dwell in Gezer. The Canaanites dwelt in Gezer among them. So here's Ephraim up here, here's Gezer down here, and they're saying the Canaanites. So they've got Bethel and Ai up here. They took all that. They've got Shiloh, and I think they've got Beth Horon, but they are letting them stay there. And this is going to be very bad for the Danites because they're surrounded by Canaanites here. Gath they don't clear out. And I think Ekron gets taken back over by the Philistines. And you've got the Danites, and it's like, okay, so you got a sandwich between Canaanites and Philistines, and nobody is apparently helping them drive them out. Okay, now the Danites suck, so maybe they had it coming. Neither did Zebulun drive out the inhabitants of Kitron, of Nahal. So here's Zebulun up here, but the Canaanites dwelt among them and became tributaries. Neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants. So this is Asher of Akko. Akko. I don't know where Akko is. Maybe that's Aksaf. Aksib, Hevlah, Aphek, or Rehob. But the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites and the inhabitants of the land. They did not drive them out. So this coastal land all belongs to Asher. They didn't do a good job. Neither did Naphtali drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, nor the inhabitants of Bethnath. They dwelt in the Canaanites and the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and Bethanath became tributaries to them. So they're all sitting here going, oh, let's just let them pay us free food and stuff, free wood and whatever. Like, let's just get free stuff from them instead of wiping them out and having to work ourselves. Seems smart, but it's not smart. And the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountain. So remember, you have Amorites, they pushed them all out, and they're down here. And the Danites are going to be pushed up to the mountains next to Judah and Benjamin and Ephraim because they can't take their land because it says they would not suffer them to come down the valley. But the Amorites would dwell in the Mount Heres in Aijalon and Shalbim in the hand of the house of Joseph. Yet the hand of the house of Joseph prevailed that they became tributaries. And the coast of the Amorites was from going up from Akrabim to the rock and upward. So let's see if we can find Akrabim. And so what they're doing is basically they're forcing the Danites to stay up in this mountain. See this Lehi and all this stuff right here. This is where the story of Samson is going to kind of start out. And they basically have all these cities all around them, and they're not going to let them come down in the mountains, okay? So they really get weak pretty quick after Joshua dies, and they just stop having conquest. Now, they have their brothers and stuff like that who can fight with them, but for whatever reason, is once Joshua fights the big battles for them, they're just like, everyone's kind of on their own. We're going to see some rallies under certain judges where they're going to get multiple tribes together, but for the most part, they're just like, that's your problem, dude. And they apparently don't like Dan. Well, Dan, you're gonna see this thing all over world history, okay? The sons of the legitimate wife or the legitimate heir tend not to like the sons of the concubine, okay? And Dan was the son of the maidservant, remember? So you've got Ephraim and Benjamin. So you got Joseph's and Benjamin's. Those are Jacob's two favored, and Judah. So it's like all Jacob's favorite kids are right here. Why aren't they helping Dan? Nobody likes Dan, apparently. And so Dan's going to get better, and he's going to go start a counterfeit priesthood. And I believe they're rejecting Dan. I believe there's largely a rejection of Dan, and that's why Dan is going to go away. Okay. The coast of Amorites was from Akrabim and to the rock upward. I don't see Akrabim here, but there's apparently a rock there, and it's amazing, and it's north of that. Everybody knows where that rock is. Okay. And the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I made you go out of Egypt and brought you in the land which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. Okay? And you shall make no league with the inhabitants of the land. So there's a deal here. I will never break covenant with you. You shall make no league with the inhabitants of the land. What are these tributary things? You shall throw down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Why are you making deals with these people? You're not supposed to make deals with them. And tributaries is a deal. Okay? You're saying, basically, we will protect you militarily and not destroy you militarily, and you're going to keep paying us tribute. We're doing this so you guys can keep making us money, but you're never building an army. Okay? Now, it seems like a good deal economically, but God wanted these people gone. It's their influence that God hates. He doesn't want you marrying because eventually you're gonna. That girl's good looking, and we're dominant, and we've got more money, so she definitely wants to marry us. And that's how all their idols are gonna get into you, okay? Because these girls are gonna come with their idols. They're gonna have the little idols and their secret prayers, and then they're gonna slowly whisper into your ears while you're looking at their boobies, and then you're gonna worship their idols. That's why you gotta watch who you marry, right? And so he says, I will not drive them out from before you, but they will be as thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare to you. And it came to pass, when the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the children of Israel, they lifted up their voice and wept, and they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there unto the Lord. And when Joshua had let these people go, and the children of Israel went every man to his inheritance to possess the land, and the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, who had seen the great days of the works of the Lord, who had seen the great works of the Lord that he did for Israel. Okay, so notice they're rewinding back. Joshua's alive again somehow. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died being 110 years old. Okay, so they're it's not in a great chronological order. Remember, it's talking about like this is what happens after Joshua dies. And now we're going to the list of judges, and he's telling you about the judges thing, and this is now Joshua's alive again, okay? So it says Joshua the son of Nun died being 110 years old, and they buried him in the border of the Timnath-Heres and the Mount Ephraim on the north side of the hill of Gash. And that's clearly where that is. Somewhere up here. And all that generation were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them which did not know the Lord, yet the works which he had done for Israel. So maybe a lot of these battle things took place while Joshua was still alive, because he does his battles for about 5 years, and he's still going to be alive like 110. So he's 95, so 15 years after that. So maybe all that takes place after 15 years, and then Joshua dies, okay? But for whatever reason, you have after the death of Joshua, and then you have in chapter 2, Joshua is going to die again. So this is what I'm saying. That whoever's writing this is cobbling this together from multiple different tribal records. Okay, and it's not the smoothest narrative. Okay, so Joshua came back to life. I'm not going to tell you that this was meant to be a type of the resurrection of Jesus here, okay? I'm just saying Joshua died, comes back to life, dies again, okay? So Joshua the son of Nun is dead, and all that generation were gathered into the fathers, and there arose another generation after them and knew not the Lord, nor what he had done for Israel. So these are people who did not survive, who were not alive for Joshua's stuff or Egypt. So you're probably looking at least 40 years deep from the conquest, maybe 50. And they forsook the Lord their God, their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, and the gods of the people that were around them, and they bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtoreth. Baal and Ashtoreth are going to be primarily worshipped among, well, the Canaanites just in general all worship them, because remember, Ashtoreth is where the Anakim come from. Baal is going to be based on the Lord appearing in the storm to Job, okay? So this is going to be their ripoff of the Lord, and Ashtoreth is the woman who the Nephilim come from, okay? And they're going to be like, oh yeah, they're like a pair. They're like husband and wife, and they're the main mother-father god, okay? And you're going to find a main mother-father god in all, pretty much, I mean, Ahura Mazda, you could say Ahura Mazda is kind of is where strict monotheism comes from, where there's no, triunity, if you will. But even that later on, he's going to be worshipped with Ahita, which is this lotus flower god that lights upon the waters, like the Holy Spirit lights upon the waters. So you do have a masculine God the Father and a feminine spirit of wisdom, or spirit of the waters, or spirit of life, or something like that. And they're going to be typically overlaid with the bull of heaven and the harlot, who, and so you're going to have this god of wisdom, this motherly god of wisdom, become this harlot. And when you get to the book of Proverbs, that's why you have these two women all throughout Proverbs, is the harlot you want to stay away from, and this godly mother of wisdom, you want to find a wife that's like her, okay? And so you see this very clear parallel. The Holy Spirit is telling Jesus to find a church like the Holy Spirit, okay? So you want a church that's filled with the Holy Spirit. And that idiom, that language, that idea of a motherly, fatherly Godhead seems to be everywhere from the beginning, okay? So I don't think, if you reject the idea of a feminine Holy Spirit and wisdom in the Holy Spirit being or wisdom in Proverbs being the Holy Spirit and also clearly feminine and a motherly figure, I don't think you're getting it right. I think there's a lot of stuff you need to understand, and that also helps you understand why these guys were deceived into thinking Ashtaroth, who's a harlot, is actually this female goddess, okay? Because she's a goddess of lust, and you're going to find back and forth goddess of marriage and love, and then lust, okay? So you have a goddess of wisdom in the ancient world, and then you have a goddess of seduction, basically. And I'm going to suggest to you that those are pagan corruptions, ignorant corruptions of what was the woman who slept with angels to make Nephilim and the Holy Spirit. That's what I think. And Baal is going to be merged with the bull of heaven to become Zeus. But I think Baal is literally the lord of the storm, and that's based on the story of Job, because Job would have happened somewhere around here. Okay? We don't know exactly where Job happened. Could have happened as far south as Edom, as far north as Damascus, based on the different people who are named there. But it looks like it's up here in the region of Aram, and then he marries in with the Edomites, and then he becomes a king down there. Okay? And so Baal is going to be this storm god that's based on this story, this famous story in the region that happened, because God appeared in a storm. Okay? And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he delivered them into the hands of the spoilers that spoiled them, and he sold them in the hands of their enemies round about, so that they could not stand any longer before them, okay? So this is the immediate generation afterwards. They cannot stand before them anymore. So it seems like all those other battles happened immediately after Joshua died, and because they're putting them to tribute, they're starting to serve their gods, because they're marrying in with them, which is exactly what God told them not to do. Whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them, for even the Lord had said as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. Now, if they knew what was the problem, they would know, well, there's a priest up here who talks to God and stuff like that. Maybe we can find out what's going on. We had this law that we were supposed to follow. Maybe we could go find out if they were doing something wrong, okay? This is what you want to do in life when you have chaos and you have storms, okay? First thing, I'm not saying persecution doesn't happen to people who are doing the right thing, but first thing, you go and check the Word of God. Are you doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing? Second thing is you check your conscience. We have an individual leading of the Holy Spirit, okay? And maybe the Holy Spirit is telling you something and you know it, okay? Now, the Holy Spirit will give you individual words from the Lord. Don't do that. I want you to go there. Don't marry that person. You shouldn't date this person. And then you do it. And then the chaos is in your life. And why? Okay, so the first thing you do is you go check the Word. Second thing you do, you check the Spirit, okay? Because the Word is for everybody, and the Spirit is for you, okay? But the Spirit's not going to disagree with the Word, so you check the Word first, okay? Same thing. Well, they've got the law, and then they've got the priest who can go... remember, these guys aren't filled with the Holy Spirit. They're not Spirit-led like we are, unless they're a prophet, right? But they have the priest who can go get the Urim and Thummim and ask God, what's wrong? What are we doing wrong here? Oh, God told you not to marry in with these people. Is that exactly what you're doing? Yeah. He told you to wipe them out. Is that exactly what you're doing? Yeah. But they don't do that. Okay? Look how ignorant they're getting right away. And why? It takes cultural discipline to do things like this. And these people are just like, you know what? We're trying to plant our farms and trying to get married and trying to have kids. And we're busy. And it's hard enough to have wars and oppressions and... No, you're always going to have this stuff, okay? You're always going to have problems in life. You always start with praying and worshiping God and figuring out, what's pleasing to God and having a relationship with God. You don't just sit there, well, I'm busy though. So I don't have time for God right now because I'm really busy. And it's like, no, whatever you do, if you pray and you spend time with God, and pray and seek God before you do it, I promise you'll be more productive in the stuff you do. I have lived this out, okay? You can sit there and work your butt off and not get everywhere, and then you could pray and watch God just supernaturally money and favor and job opportunities and relational opportunities and stuff like that fall into your lap, okay? Start with God. They're not doing it, though, okay? So nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, so this is God having mercy on them despite them, which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them. And yet they would not hearken to their judges, but they went a-whoring after other gods and bowed themselves unto them, and they turned quickly out of the way which the fathers walked in, obeying the commandments of the Lord, but they did not so. And when the Lord raised up to them judges, and the Lord was with the judge and delivered them out of the hands of their enemies all the days of the judge, for it repented the Lord because of their groanings by reason. Then the Lord was with the judge and delivered them out of the hand of the enemies all of the days of the judge, for it repented the Lord because of their groanings by reason that they oppressed and vexed him. So the Lord always had sympathy on them for being vexed, because they're stupid, they're ignorant. Their parents apparently didn't teach them right, because their parents are the ones who let them mix and mingle and marry with these people, okay? So it's really their parents' fault. And it came to pass when the judge was dead that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them, to bow down to them, and ceased not from doing their own doings from their own stubborn way. You kept going back to your idols and stuff, okay? And marrying these pagans. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and because that this people had transgressed my covenant which I commanded their fathers, have not hearkened my voice. Now I want you to think about something when you're a recessive people in a land and paying tribute, okay? If you have a daughter, that daughter cannot go get a job, okay? She can work around the house, that's about it, okay? You're in a very masculine society. You definitely don't want her to go whoring about, because then nobody will want to marry her, and you're stuck taking care of her. Now, when you're living hand in mouth, which most people were back then, you didn't have retirement savings, you didn't have 501c3s or 401ks, I mean, you didn't have, unless you were an estate owner, a landowner, which most of these people are not, you didn't have a pile of money sitting around. And so to have to take care of a daughter into your old age could be death for you, okay? You need your daughters married away, okay? And so if you have a daughter, you're going to do everything you can to make her look good. You're going to do everything you can to keep her healthy. You're going to do everything you can to get her married off, okay? And when you got these people who are collecting tribute from you and they've got more money than you, you definitely want your daughter to be married to one of these guys. So you're going to do things like, hey, go hang around that guy over there. Hey, like they do these things to be seen, okay? And obviously these guys are going to be like, oh, dang, we got the money and we got the power and they got the good-looking women. Let's get the women, right? And it's going to kind of suck to be a young man in that day, because you basically have to serve these guys and prove yourselves up to them for anyone to give you a daughter, or work really hard to be able to have a wife. But these guys have estates, and these guys have money, and they're dominant, and they're getting tribute from you, so they've got extra money, right? And so they can have a wife or wives or multiple wives. And this is something that the Jews do. This is something that dominant peoples do all over the world. You see people with multiple wives, okay? And so what you're going to end up with, what's going to happen if you've got 3 Canaanite wives and they all worship idols and you're the minority in your own house and your kids are being raised by them? And oh, by the way, you're not paying a ton of attention to your kids because you've got 3 wives with 3 different basically groups of kids, and who are all clinging to them and trying to make sure they have the primary influence on them, and they're all foreign and they all worship foreign gods. Your kids are going to worship foreign gods pretty soon, okay? It's not going to take long for this to happen. It's going to take, I mean, think about it. If you're a Christian woman married to a Muslim, what are you going to teach your kids? You're going to teach them Christianity. Well, the same is going to happen in reverse. If you're a Muslim woman married to a Christian man, you could be married to that guy because it's financial security for you. Maybe you even love him, but you sure as heck aren't going to teach your kids his religion, okay? You're going to teach your kids your religion. You see this everywhere. Like I don't want to talk about ex-girlfriends, but they're going to teach their kids their religion. And you're going to see the mom teaching the kids one religion, the dad not liking it, but who spends more time with the kids? The mom. So they're going to largely follow the mom. And maybe when they get older, they're going to break away from the mom stuff. Maybe. But in a lot of cases, they don't, because guess what? They're going to go find a woman from those same people. And now they've got their mom teaching them that, they got their wife teaching them that, and then they've got their wife teaching their kids that. And you get 40 years deep in this, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by people, and you are the extreme minority. And unless you are a very dominant alpha male, and you have a system of conglomerating with other men and teaching these men the faith, and then teaching the children the faith, and teaching them to lead and be heads and priests of their household, this is going to fall apart really quickly. And that's why the church is in crap mode right now. That's why I get way more comments, opinionated comments about religion from women than I do from men. And when I get them from men, they're usually very ignorant. Okay? Why? I got to work, and then after work I got sports, and I got to find some time to work out, and then I got to take the kid to baseball, and blah blah blah. And men don't spend a lot of time in the Word of God. And when they do spend time in the Word of God, they don't spend that time spiritually leading their household and teaching their families the Word of God and making sure they're the dominant voice in their household and not their wives. Okay? And that's fine if you've got a godly wife who's teaching up your kids in the fear and the admonition of the Lord, but that's not what God ordained. Okay? And what you find is a lot of these ideas, these superstitious ideas, these hearsay ideas, these speculation ideas do creep in through women. It's just what happens. Not exclusively, but it happens, and it keeps going down the line, okay? That's why you see in the charismatic movement, so much of it is spread around by women, okay? So, now, I also will not henceforth drive them out anymore from the nations which Joshua left when he died. He's upset here. The anger of the Lord was hot against Israel because the people transgressed my covenant which I commanded their fathers and have not hearkened to my voice. He said, I won't ever break my commandment with you, but you don't make a covenant with these people. It's a two-part deal. God will eventually break his covenant with them because they persistently rebel against him, and he breaks his covenant with them in Zechariah, which happens when they betray Jesus. Okay? So he says that through them, I'm not going to drive them out, that through them I might prove Israel whether or not they will keep the Lord and walk therein as their fathers did or not. So in other words, now I'm not going to drive them out of the land. Why? Now they're going to have to be tested as to whether or not they're going to follow God or these pagan idols. Okay? This is the judgment. Therefore the Lord left those nations without driving them out hastily, neither delivered them out of the hand of Joshua. Now, he's not saying he's never going to drive them out. He's saying you want to keep getting enticed by their gods, well, then I'm not going to drive them out. Okay? They can repent and throw down their idols and go, let's get rid of these people and God will be like, all right, let's do this. Okay? Now these are the nations that the Lord left in Israel by them, even as many in Israel did not know the wars of Canaan. Only the generations of the children of Israel might know to teach them war, and at least as before, to teach them war, at least such as before knew nothing thereof. I need it. Sometimes the King James just gets you reading backwards because it's going to put words in an order that does not flow like modern English. Okay, it would be like, then doth they grab them, and it's like, then he grabbed them. Like, why do you need to say it like that? Because they're Angles and Saxons, and there's 5 different people groups who are fighting over whose language is going to be dominant, and then you end up with whatever English is. Now these are the nations that Jehovah left. Let's see, let's try Now these are the nations which the Lord left to test Israel. That is all that had not experienced. That is all who had not experienced any of the wars of Canaan. Okay, in order that the generations of Israel might be taught war, those who had not experienced it formerly. These nations are the 5 lords of the Philistines, and the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites, who lived in Mount Lebanon, and Mount Baal Hermon, and Lebo-Hamath. They were for testing Israel to find out if they would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded their fathers through Moses. The sons of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and they took their daughters for themselves as wives, and gave their own daughters and their sons to their sons and served other gods. So you're not just taking their daughters, you're also marrying your daughters with them. And just so you know, economically, you want your daughters married off, and you're going to see stuff like this happening, and serve their gods. And the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgot the Lord their God, and served the Baals, so there's multiples, and Ashtaroth. Okay, remember, there's a bunch of different tribes here, and they're going to have Baals, and it's their version of Yahweh. Okay, it's going to have their own corruptions and their own mythologies and all this stuff attached to it, but to them, it's their version of Yehovah. Okay, and their version of the Holy Spirit is Asherah. Okay, because they still have these Anakim living among them, and they know it all comes with Ashtoreth and Asherah, and she's somehow bringing in these, to them, in their corrupted minds, Christ types, these people who are part God, part man, and they're supposed to be like our saviors, right? Wrong. And that's who they're worshiping. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, so that they sold them into the hands of Cushan Rishathaim, the king of Mesopotamia, and the sons that served Cushan Rishathaim. 8 years. Okay? Now, Cushan is like Cushite. And what had happened was, after, you're going to have the Amorites who are going to, let's see. The Amorites are going to take over Babylon after Nimrod falls, okay? They're going to do a couple of things. They're going to take over much of Aramea, which is going to be basically Syria, and they're going to take over Babylon eventually. And they become the group that comes up with the Code of Hammurabi and all that, okay? But that is only going to last to the late 17th century. And the late 17th century is going to be around the time the Jews go into Egypt, okay? They're also going to conquer these cities up in these cities. If you study world history, these cities are kind of important if you study ancient Near Eastern history. But this city of Mari that's up here, okay? So I want you to see this. They've got Babylon down here. They've got Mari up here. And what is going to happen is they're basically going to dominate the region from Canaan all the way over here until around the time the Jews go into Egypt, okay? They're doing well. And I think at one time they get up to Haran and stuff like that. And then what you're going to have is you're going to have this group of people form. Now the Hittites, while they're doing this, the Hittites are going to go all the way up into Turkey. And they're going to conquer primarily the people of Lud. Okay, now Lud is going to be a Semitic people. You're going to find out that you're going to have the Arameans, and Lud is going to be the youngest, okay? And the Ludites are going to start down here, and you're going to have a language that they're now finding out called Luwian, okay? Well, that's the Ludite language, okay? And the Ludians are eventually going to reemerge after the Hittites fall as a kingdom called Lydia, okay? And this is going to be in the generation before Ezekiel. And they're going to have a king named Gyges, and that's why you have people who think Gog is in Turkey, okay? It's not in Turkey. This is going to be Ezekiel prophesying about the future, and this king Gyges is before Ezekiel, okay? So he's not prophesying about Gyges, okay? This is going to be a theory that comes out in the 1960s, and it's going to stick. And the reason this is going to stick is because you have a bunch of stuff going on here. You have the tribes of Meshech here. They're called the Mushki. Remember, this is where the ark was, okay? And so all the Japhethites, you're going to have Gobekli Tepe right down here, okay? You see where Haran is right here. Gobekli Tepe is right around here. And Haran is going to be Aramean. These are going to be Aramean people. These are going to be Asherite people. Over to the south of them is going to be the Chaldean people, or the children of Arphaxad. To the south of them is going to be the Elamites, okay? And these are all going to be the children of Shem. And for whatever reason, both the Canaanites and the Cushites seem to be obsessed with conquering and subduing the children of Shem and replacing them with their gods, because those are the ones who are destined to have Christ come through them. Okay, so the Ludians are right here, and you're going to have basically see a Massa. You're going to have I don't recognize any of these Hittite names, so I'm not going to try to transliterate that for you, but you're basically going to have people who become they're descendants of Magog. And they're called Galatians in the Bible, but that the G, L, and T is going to transliterate to C, L, and T. And so the Gauls, the Galatians, the Celts, you're going to have these different Celti and Celt tribes. You're going to have Celt spelled with a Q. You're going to have, you keep having this in transliteration. You're going to have G's, C's, K's, and Q's and stuff like that. And it's just language confusion from the Tower of Babel, okay? But the point is the Gauls, the Galatians, the Celts, and all these different people are all descendants of Magog, and they start out down here, and then they're going to spread far. They're going to spread into Spain and France. They're going to spread into England. They're going to become the Gaelic peoples, which are the Irish and the Scots, okay? The Scyths, which are another descendant of Magog, they're going to become these roving horse lords that eventually become the Mongols. Okay, they're going to have. He's going to have another descendant called Gog that is going to become Gog is going to translate it to Joj, which is going to be called Jojo's son, which is eventually going to be called Gogoryu, which is eventually going to be called Korea. Okay, so. So those are all descendants of Magog, and you're going to see these people basically spread from Ireland and Scotland to northern China. Okay, they're everywhere because they were some of the first people to develop the horse, the chariot, the wheel, and they just move out and they just colonize far and wide really fast. Okay, and then they're eventually going to come back in here and they're going to raid and stuff like that. And you're going to have these people eventually called Urartu, which is Ararat, and I believe this is going to be Riphath or other descendants of Gomer. But the Gomerians become Cimmerians, and I don't know how you get to that, but the G becomes a C, and you have the Cimmerians. And those people are going to become horse nomads and stuff like that, and then they're going to come back in and invade and be part of the enmity of Riphath. And these people are all together going to become today like Azerbaijan and the Armenians. And Azerbaijan eventually is descended from Ashkenaz, and Ashkenaz is going to move out and become the Germans. Okay? All these people start out right around here. And so what you have is this Luwian languages, because the Ludites are the main people group around here, but because all the surrounding peoples, which are also in the Hittite Empire, are Japhethites, and then the Hittites are Hamites because they're from Canaan. You're going to have this language that they're going to call the oldest Proto-Indo-European language, but it's named it's a Canaanite tribe, so it's a Hamite tribe who's ruling over them, and the language is named after a Semite. Why? Because those are the main peoples that are here, but all these other peoples they're mixing and mingling with are trading the language, and it's becoming a Creole. Okay. Next to them, you're going to have these people called Mitanni. And what the Mitanni seem to be is an alliance of Arameans and Armenians, so descendants of Gomer. And these are going to be Japhethites mixed with Shemites, and this is going to become a Creole language, and it's called the Hurrian language. And the Mitanni, I looked this up, and the etymology just means the United Kingdom. Okay? The Mitanni means United Kingdom. Why? Because you're going to have these united Japhethites and Shemites here, because what are they realizing? These Amorites and these Hittites are out to dominate all the Shemites, and they're coming for the Japhethites next, right? So we've already had Nimrod, and he's a problem. Now we have the Hittites and the Amorites taking over everything, and so these guys are going to unite against them, and this Mitanni is going to stay pretty strong. The Hittites are eventually going to fall. I think the Mitanni outlast them. And then as the rise of Assyria happens, they're kind of landlocked and they don't really have a prayer. Okay. But for a while, you're going to have many centuries. Let's see the Mitanni. About 300 years. you're going to have this Mitanni kingdom, and there's their core. It's going to be right around where Gobekli Tepe is and where Haran is. Remember, they're just 20 miles apart, okay? And you're going to have Japhethite people here, and these are going to be the main people through whom the chariot comes in, okay? Because the chariot gets developed by these people up here with their, it starts out as just horse carts, and then it turns to war chariots. And those guys, because they've got the chariot, they're able to keep this strong kingdom in between these Amorite Babylonians and these Hittites right here for a while, okay? And they even extend their trade here. And they're basically dominating the surrounding region, but this is their core kingdom. And it's a combination of trade and warfare. And the Hittites are going to fade because during this time, the Danites are going to be raiding them. Danites and the Asherites and a bunch of sea peoples are going to be raiding them. And the Hittites are going to fall. Remember, they lost this one big military battle to Joshua, and it's just going to keep going downhill from there. And because the Lydians are the majority of the people there, and you have all these smaller Japhethite tribes because their brothers and cousins got horses and skedaddled out. That's why they're a smaller people group. The Hittites are going to be able to dominate them for a while, but eventually all these people are going to make a comeback. The Greeks are going to be there, the Trojans are going to be there, and you have all these different Japhethite people groups that are eventually going to, the Hittites are not going to last. And the sea peoples seem to eventually sack Hattusa, which is the capital of the Hittites. So it seems like the Danites lead the overthrow of the Hittite Empire, okay? And that's why you're going to have all these Greeks in league with Danites, because they liberated them from the Hittites, okay? And they seem to become the Spartans and a bunch of other people, but the Spartans seem to be the main ones they are among the Greeks. Now, these Mitanni here are going to stay here, and they're going to get pretty strong, but because they're here and here, and remember, the Israelites have defeated the Amorites down here, so their Amorite, this stronghold of trade and all this stuff is gone. Their access to the Hittites, their cousins, are gone, and they would fight with the Hittites. And eventually you're going to see the Cushites. Remember, this is Nimrod in the south, and these guys were the Cushites. They're going to make a comeback, and that's called the Kassite kingdom, okay? So these would have not necessarily been descendants of Nimrod. They could have been the legitimate heirs or other Cushites who were there, because this starts out as Kish, that's Cushites, and then it eventually transliterates to Kassites, and then this is going to be the next Babylonian Empire, and you see this is the 13th century BC, okay? They're going to be there from the 15th century BC, so this is, imagine this being 40 years before the Jews leave Egypt to around 100 years shy of the end of the book of Judges, okay? This is how long this kingdom is going to be. And these people are going to project power up to here. Now, I listened to a guy say, there's no way these guys could have projected power up here. Yes, they could, because the Mitanni aren't trying to be an expansive empire. What they're trying to be is a united kingdom that is strong, has good trade, and can't be conquered by outsiders, okay? So the Mitanni are up here, and the Mitanni are probably trading with them. They're probably getting along just fine. And what these guys are going to do is they're going to take over what used to be Nimrod's empire, because these are probably descendants of Nimrod's cousins. And they're moving kind of the capital back to Kish and all that, right? Like, I don't know if that's where their capital is, but it looks like the Amorites had Babylon, then the Hittites sacked Babylon, and then the Amorites have it again for a little while, and then eventually these organic Cushites who are in the south here. Remember, these are Semites, these are Chaldeans up here, and in the south these are Cushites, okay? But the Cushites are dominant. And these Cushites make a comeback, and they have the Kassite Empire for a few hundred years, okay? Now, this guy who suppresses them is Kushan Rishthaim, and I think it means Kashite double evil or something like that. So it could be a name that they're giving him. Remember, some of these guys have the name Sin in their name, so I don't know if I don't know how this works out. Maybe they're just openly evil, or that's what the Jews call them. But this means like the double evil Cushite king. Okay, what does that mean? Does it mean he's twice as bad as the kings before? I don't know, but this is he comes and he's going to oppress them for 8 years. Okay, so these guys are probably in the height of their kingdom. They're going to be all the way up into here, and then they're going to be like, hey, let's go mess with these guys. Why not? Why not have access to the Mediterranean over here and try to take that out? And it just says that they served them 8 years. So what did they do? They put them to tribute. Why wouldn't they do that if Nimrod did that? Okay, Nimrod did that to that region, so why wouldn't they? And it says the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord and raised up deliverer for the sons of Israel, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and judged Israel. And remember, it says Caleb's younger brother, okay? What this really, I think, means is grandnephew, okay? But he is a brother in the sense that he's, of his tribe and he's younger, okay? So this is Caleb's grandnephew. Remember, he's still alive when Caleb's alive, so you're probably looking at this guy is probably in his 40s, 50s now. And he's probably dominant among the people of Hebron. It says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel. When he went to the Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and he prevailed over him. So we don't know what happened. We just know that the Spirit of the Lord came over him, and he defeated him in battle, okay? So remember, these guys would have had a garrison. They've still got a big kingdom. They've got to keep under wraps over in Babylon. So whatever armies they had over there as a garrison, he comes and beats them and kicks them out, okay? And it says the land had rest for 40 years, and Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died, okay? So, like I said, he probably would have been in his 50s or 60s. Maybe he's going to maybe he's in his 40s, and he's going to die around his 80s, and that's that, okay? So the time that he lives after he defeats them, they have peace, and they're going to have 40 years. Now, I went and made this chart about judges, and I went through and just calculated how long all this is, because you're going to have 480 years between Moses receiving the law and the Temple of Solomon, and I believe that is perfectly accurate. Bishop Usher is going to calculate that in his calculation, and like I said, everything he gets and everything I get is within 5 years through the entire 4,000 year timeline, and those differences gradually creep in over time, okay? And so what I do is I break this down, and what it looks like is you're going to have concurrent things. You're going to have things that happen at the same time, and they're not necessarily going to be clearly depicted as having the same time. But most of this is going to be chronological, and it looks like there's going to be overlap between Samson and Samuel. So Samuel's going to be a young kid while Samson is judging. You're going to have Gideon and Barak. Barak and Deborah is going to be in the north. Gideon is going to be in the south, and they both seem to calculate the same 40 years of peace. So it seems like Gideon delivers southern, so what we'd consider Judah, and Barak and Deborah can deliver the north, what we'd consider Israel, okay? This guy Shamgar is going to be concurrent with Ehud after Othniel. But the point is you're going to have, how many years were they oppressed? 8 years. How many years were they delivered? 40 years, okay? So you're going to have Othniel and him. He's going to be fine. And what I also did down here, because this is from the book of Ruth, this is something I struggled with, is that you only have like 5 generations between Solomon, who's there with Jacob, or with Joshua, and David. You only have 5 generations here. And I'm going, well, if this is 400 years, I mean, it's almost 400 years. It's not quite 400 years. It's 480 years if you go back to the law. So you're going to take 40 years for Moses away. You're going to take 40 years for King Saul's reign away. And you're going to take 40 years for King David's reign a year. And then 3 years into Solomon's reign. So you're taking away 120 years from 480 years. So you're going to get about 375 years. So you got 375 years roughly for the book of Judges, because you're going to have some overlap with some of these guys and stuff like that. And I calculate this in the ballpark of, because you're going to have, we know Saul and David's reigns, how long they are, but there's going to be some overlap between Solomon being a judge, and we don't know Samuel, and we don't know exactly how old Samuel was when he died, or when he was born. It just doesn't tell you that, but we know he dies while Saul is still king. So much of what he's estimated to judge Israel a total of like 60 years, but much of that is going to be overlapped with Saul's kingship, okay? And then some of that is going to be overlapped with Samson. So what you have to pull out of this is somewhere around, I think it's like 320 years. And what I did is I just did the math on that and go, okay, well, if Solomon was 60 years old and he married Rahab and she was having kids by 40, and then Boaz was up to 80 years old and he married Ruth and she's having kids by 40, we know you'd literally have to have these guys in their 60s to 80s marrying a younger woman, which we know they did, okay? And then we know Jesse has David, and David is his youngest kid, okay? So it's all very possible. This is very possible that this works out, that you just have 5 generations. It's just that these guys it's always a kid from a younger generation. And that seems to be the case in the line of David, in the kingly line, that it keeps being a younger descendant that rules. Sometimes it's the 6-year-old they throw on the throne because everyone got killed. Other times it's just this guy's ruling for 40 years and then he's going to pick a younger son to be the next king, so that son has a nice long rule. Okay, so what you're going to have is you're going to have guys between 60 and 80 having kids. Okay, and that's not unheard of, especially if you've had a wife and then that wife dies by the time you're 70, let's say. Okay, well, if that wife dies, you're not going to all of a sudden learn to cook and clean by yourself if you're a warrior guy. Okay, you're old, but you're certainly not going to figure out how to cook and clean. These guys were not domesticated like men are now, okay? They're going to go get a younger wife. They've got money. They've got assets, right? They're going to go get a younger wife, and you're going to find these stories in the Chronicles, and these guys, next thing you know, they're going to be 60, 70, 80 years old. I mean, Abraham does it when he's like 130, okay? And he goes and gets a younger wife and has like 6 more kids, okay? Well, that's what these guys are going to do too. They're going to get a younger wife and the second wife, and then that wife, they're going to have a bunch of old kids. Now, why is Boaz older and Ruth is, creeping up to him to try to be his wifey when he's obviously older and he's got estates and stuff like that? And the answer is probably because he's an older retired man whose wife has died. Salmon looks like he was one of these guys who was with them in the wilderness, one of the younger kids, so he would have been like 60 when they comes out of the wilderness. And when did he marry Rahab? Well, we don't know. I mean, he married her. We don't know if he married her right after they got Rahab. She could have just been hanging out for a while, and then all of a sudden this guy's like, that Rahab's not married to anyone, and she's got a good rep now, so I'm going to marry her, And so as long as you have these guys, older guys marrying younger women and having kids, then this works out, okay? And this total amount of time, if we're taking Samuel out of this, is going to be roughly, I think it's like 320 years or something like that, okay? You take the time with Samuel, and it's going to be like 370 years, okay? But the point is all the time adds up. All the time adds up. You don't need to go to secular history and correct the Bible with it, okay? That's one of the things the Bible was very good about, is keeping track of its history. Keeping track of how many years happened between things, okay? And that's why when you see Paul say things like the law came 430 years later, he's not just rounding. It's exactly 430 years later. And when you hear them saying stuff like it's 480 years, it's like, well, that seems convenient. It's a nice round number between, like the law coming, and it's a multiple of 12, no less. And a multiple of 12 times 4 gives you 480. And it's like these numbers are in the Bible, and yet you do the math, and it adds up. It works out. And then you line this stuff up with secular history, and you're like, wow, it all seems to line up with, remember, these secular histories are largely estimates based on, different calendars and stuff like that, and geological records and a combination of things, and they're still always within like 50 years of what the Bible says, okay? So that's why we need to just start reverencing the Bible as the primary historical document for the world, okay? Now, Othniel the son of Kenaz died, and then Israel did evil again, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab. So what you're going to see with Israel is they're going to defeat one enemy, and then another enemy is going to come from a different place, okay? So they start out with Othniel, and he's fighting Mesopotamians from the northeast. Ehud is going to be fighting Moabites from the southeast, okay? Ehud, Shagmar is going to be fighting Philistines in the west. Barak is going to be fighting in North Canaan. Gideon's going to be fighting the Midianites in the south, so probably in the Negev in southern Judah. And then it's going to be the Ammonites. It's going to be the Gileadites fighting the Ammonites, and it's almost never the same people twice. The only people it is who come in for a while is you're going to see the Philistines towards the end become their main enemy. because these guys rise up, and once they put them down, they seem to stay down. Okay, and you're not going to have like the Ammonites and the Moabites rise up again until after Solomon, which is pretty impressive. Okay, like when they put them down, they put them down. So, but then they screw up again, and then they're going to start getting a new group of people harassing them. And so next one's Moab and Eglon. We're going to pause here, and we're going to skip over to Benjamin. Okay, Eglon is the king of Moab, and he oppresses them. And the guy who delivers them, it says he gathered himself the sons of Ammon and Amalek, so they're all going to team up, and went and defeated Israel and possessed the city of the palm trees. And the sons of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. But when the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer from them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, left-handed man, and all the sons of Israel sent tribute to him by Eglon, the king of Moab. So notice he's a left-handed man. The Benjamites apparently have a bunch of lefties among them. And when you look up this guy, Gera and Ehud, in the book of Chronicles, you're going to find a Gera, and then you can find Abihud. No, let's see here. You see, these are the sons of Ehud. They are the heads of the fathers' households. They are the inhabitants of Geba that carried them into exile into Manasseh. Okay, so this Ehud stays alive and had descendants, and their father's house is named Geba, or I'm sorry, yeah, the inhabitants is named Geba, and they're descendants of Gera, who is the son of Bela. And Bela is Benjamin's firstborn. Okay, so you got Bela, Benjamin, Bela, Gera, and I think Shaphunim and Haran are also sons of Gera, because it's listed like he has two sons named Gera. He's not going to have two sons with the same name, okay? So Gera is the father of Ehud, okay? So we're 5 generations in, and I want you to show you this, because you have Benjamin, Bela, Gera, and Ehud. So 4 generations in. I apologize. This seems to be right after they're getting into the Promised Land, or there could be some people missing in the genealogy. But when Benjamin is in Egypt, he has like 7 sons. He has a lot of sons. But when you get to the book of Chronicles, he only has 3 listed. And the reason is the rest of them all get wiped out completely, okay? So this guy, Ehud, is basically going to be one of the survivors of Benjamin, and they knocked down Benjamin from I think they have 20 or 40,000 men down to 600, okay? And Ehud seems to be one of them, okay? So we're going to skip that, and before we get into Ehud's story, we're going to jump ahead and read this Benjamite story here, because it's at the end of the book. So you start in Judges 19. It says, "Now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel that there was a certain Levite." And well, we're going to read the Danite story first, because all this seems to happen around the time of Othniel. It all seems to be part of that, okay? So we'll start in 17. So basically the book of Judges, the chronology of it officially ends with Samson. And what you have is Samson kicking the crap out of the Philistines, but then somehow the Philistines make an immediate comeback in the days of Samuel. And remember, the Judahites are all scared of them in Samson's day. And why is Samson kick their butt and they're immediately making a comeback? And that's my theory, that Samson went over to Crete, kicked them all out of Crete, and then the Cretan Philistines came back and reinforced the Philistines in Gaza, and that's why they're strong again, okay? So it says, "There's a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name is Micah." Okay, you're going to see a couple of stories take place from the hill country of Ephraim. That is also where Shiloh was. That is also where the tabernacle is. So you're probably going to have these records, these stories are going to be kept by the priesthood and added to the book of Judges. And Samuel's writing the book of Judges, and he's the first of the prophets. And so you have a division of the literature going down from, the prophets, the traditional prophets keeping records, and the priests keeping records. And what it looks like is probably under Ezra or something like that, the priests added their records to the book of Judges, and the book of Ruth from the house of David gets slapped in right there because they know that's when these stories took place. Okay? So this is, now there was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse in my hearing. Behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be my son by the Lord. And it says, and he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother says, I wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now, therefore, I will return them to you. And God said, don't make molten images. And whoever this woman is of the hill country of Ephraim, she's apparently loaded. She's got 1,100 pieces of silver chilling. It's probably her life savings. And she's got a son. Where's her husband? I don't know. And her son, his name is Micah, and he makes an idol out of this stuff. And he says, when he returned the silver to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the silversmith, who had made them into a graven and molten image, and they were in the house of Micah. So this is all taking place in the hill country of Ephraim, somewhere up here, okay? You're going to find Bethlehem, which is right up here. You're going to find people coming up from here, okay? So whatever reason, this Ephraim, and maybe it's around the region of Bethel, they keep having problems with idolatry over and over and over again, okay? So the man Micah had a shrine. He made an ephod. An ephod is basically like a tunic or a skirt kind of thing. This ephod, you keep having these ephods, and I think the ephod goes back to being symbolic of how Adam was given a loincloth by God, and I think that's why wherever you have a priest, you have an ephod, okay? This seems to be, like, if you get an example of an ephod seems to be like a decorated skirt, basically, okay? So this front piece, I mean, it could go over you as like a vestment, but the point is it's decorated, it's ornate, and sometimes they'd be woven with gold and stuff like that. He has a breastplate, but the ephod is going to be that overlaying skirt thing that goes over the priest. And it seems to be, again, this is all over the world, these ephod things. And it seems to be something that harkens back to Adam being given this covering of skin over that. And so it's like an over covering that is meant to symbolize kind of this Adamic, what God covering their sins or whatever. And the priests all seem to have that. Now, he has that. He has household idols, consecrated one of his sons. He says, and he consecrated one of his sons that he might be a priest. So originally it's just this, probably an Ephraimite, who just makes his son a priest. And it says, and in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. So this is how you know this is after the fact. It's saying, in those days there was no king. Okay, so obviously it's coming from the days when there's kings, right? And it says, there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of... Now see, what they're saying is Bethlehem, Judah is of the family of Judah. The city is of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he was staying there. So it's a Levite living in the city of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah. So Bethlehem is actually a person of the family of Judah, and the city's named after him, okay? And then he says, and the man departed from the city, from Bethlehem, Judah, to stay wherever he might find a place. And as he made his journey, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, where are you from? And he said to him, I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to stay wherever I may find a place. So I want to point out, he's not a Judite, he's a Levite. But remember, the Levites are scattered in all these other people's cities, okay? Micah said to him, dwell with me and be a father and a priest to me, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of clothes, and maintenance, okay? In other words, I'll give you all the food and your clothes and some walking around money, okay? Now, this is Moses' grandson. So this is going to take place probably within, I would get, he's a young man, so I would guess that this takes place right after they go into the promised land. So while the rest of them are fighting, and the Danites are recorded in the book of Joshua going to get this city in the north because they can't take their land, okay? This is going to happen right off the bat. So Moses is dead. I would assume his father Gershom is dead. Which Gershom probably would have died in his, I'm guessing, 80s. Joshua's probably dead, and this is probably in that period where they're starting to fall into idolatry, right before Othniel takes over. That would be my guess. Okay, Othniel takes over for 40 years, and if you get that time, this guy's going to be way too old. So this is probably around that time that they're falling into idolatry. And he says, and the Levite agreed to live with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became a priest and lived in the house of Micah. Now, what is going on with the family of Moses that it's this bad? That this guy, I don't know. They become kind of nobodies in the land, okay? Probably you're going to have, Noah's going to have 2 sons, and I think they're called the Kenites or whatever. These people where Jael comes from them, they seem to be the family of Moses' in-laws, and so they seem to stay among them. They seem to be friendly with the Canaanites, but they're also friendly with the Judites, so they're kind of like Switzerland there, and that's where Moses' sons seem to stay among them. So they're kind of in and out in Israel. They're not really anybody anymore, okay? Except for this guy who becomes basically the head of the Illuminati, okay? And Micah said, I know that the Lord will prosper me, seeing that I have a Levite as a priest. So he's got his own personal priest up here in the hill country of Ephraim, somewhere up here. Remember, you've got Shiloh right here where the priesthood is. I think that the Kenites are somewhere up in here too. And then you've got now this guy with his competition. So you literally have the tabernacle, and now you've got this bootleg fake temple thing as competition here among the Israelites, okay? And he says, and in those days there's no kings in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in, for until that day an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession under the tribes of Israel. Now, if it's saying that, this allotment to them, because they do get this land allotted to them, but you're going to have the Judites take all theirs, and this is going to happen in the last 15 years of Joshua. So this could be possibly while Joshua is still alive that this is going on. And this just seems really weird to me that you've got Moses' grandson while Joshua is still alive, basically leaving the family, looking for something to do, because you're going to have these descendants of Moses. It's not like they're Levites, so they don't get an inheritance in land, but they're not part of the priesthood, so they don't get tithes. And they're just kind of, well, what are you going to do? Well, this guy's like, well, how about being my priest, okay? So if he's saying that the Danites had not yet received an allotted portion of land, remember, you're going to have like the Manassites and Ephraimites and Judahites get their portions, and then they're going to go cast lots for everybody else to get there. So it seems to be that's around the time when this is, okay? On the other hand, you're going to have another story, which is about how the Danites were down here, but they didn't get enough land because they're all pressed in and they can't take their land. And that's why they go up and take Dan. So it's either right before or right after Joshua dies, okay? So the sons of Dan from their family sent from their family 5 men of their whole number, valiant men from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land, to search it. And they said to them, go search the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim and the house of Micah and lodged there. So they're down here, and they're like, we need to go find a new land. And they're like, well, let's go look for a new land. So they're wandering out. They're sending guys around the land, and they come up here. So it says they're from Zorah and Eshtaol. So let's look for Zorah and Eshtaol. So Zorah and Eshtaol is going to be the main 2 places the Danites are going to camp. Samson's story is going to take place around this area. I think he's born up in Lehi, but this is where the main camp of the Danites is. Think of them like Palestinian refugees or something like these refugee camps, right? Like they don't really have a place to settle in and build anything. They just have these camps, okay? And they're sending people up from there, and it says they go to the hill country of Ephraim to the house of Micah. They never say exactly where this is, okay? It's just in the hill country, so it might just be a house out in the country. It's not near a city or anything like that. And it says, and they were near to the house of Micah. They recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite. So notice they recognize the voice of the young man, okay? 1, he's a young man. 2, he's a known young man, okay? Remember, all these people were following Joshua into the Promised Land very recently, okay? So whoever this guy is, he's known. Why? He's Moses' grandson, that's why, okay? And they turned aside and there said to him, who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? And what do you have here? So obviously this guy would have been one of the guys hanging around Joshua's inner circle pretty recently. We know who this guy is. This is Moses' grandson here. What's up with this? And he said to them, thus and so Micah has done to me, and he's hired me, and I've become his priest. Got a new job. And they said to him, inquire of God, please, that you may know whether is on the way what we are going is going to be prosperous. So he's like, I'm setting up a counterfeit priesthood next to the Aaronic priesthood. I'm doing something very blasphemous. And they're like, cool. So why don't you inquire of the Lord for us? And the priest said to them, go in peace in your way which you are going, you have the Lord's approval. So he's already speaking for the Lord now. That's nice. This is right. He's a young man, okay? This is literally, I want you to understand this. This is the nephew, okay? This is Moses' grandson, so if you will, the grandnephew. I don't know what you call that. Like, anyways, the grandnephew of the priest. He knows how the priesthood runs. Why? Because it's his uncle's the priest, okay? And so he's just like, I'm just going to rip off their stuff and I'm just going to copy it. Anyone can do this Urim and Thummim thing. You're just giving your best guess. We'll see what happens. And then he said, then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and they saw the people there were living in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure, and there was no ruler humiliating them for anything they had. And in other words, nobody was exacting tribute from them, and they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealing with them. So it just says there's these people in Laish. It doesn't necessarily say they're Sidonians. They just seem to live after Sidonian custom, but they're far from the Sidonians. So these just seem to be these isolated people. Who are they? I don't know. Maybe I'll research that one day. But he says they came back and told their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, so down here, and the brothers said to them, what do you report? And they said, arise, let's go up against them, for we've seen the land and it is very good. So it's a good-sized chunk of land up here in the north. Here's Dan. Notice you've got rivers flowing from here, okay? So it's the rivers that are going to flow toward, this is the Sea of Galilee, and there's another little lake up here. But it's the rivers that go fill the lake that eventually overflows into the Sea of Galilee. So you got this nice little place up here. You got the rivers. Whenever anyone comes and goes and invades the land, they go south of there. So it's like they can see them coming and just like back off. The reason that these people are here in isolation and in safety, because you have the Sidonians here who are mostly interested in sea trade. So they're going to, probably have some towns and farms and stuff like that inland, but they're mostly interested in sea trade, so that's where they're consolidated. Whenever somebody comes and invades them, they basically come in around the Sea of Galilee, because you're going to have valleys down here, and these guys just sit up here like up north, and they're never really in the fray, and so they sit there and they're pretty comfortable, okay? And they've been sitting there pretty comfortable for centuries. And it says, when you go in, you'll find a secure people with spacious land. God has given it into their hand, and there's no lack of anything that is on earth. They've got water, they've got food. They're looking like they're doing good. Meanwhile, we're down here in these plains up next to a mountain with nothing. So I like what they got up here. Let's go take it. Then the family of the Danites from Zorah and Eshtaol, 600 men armed with weapons of war, went out. And they're only sitting 600. They're much larger than this. Where are they all right now? Well, the answer is they're mostly camped out here. And it seems like the fighting is starting to die down after Joshua's died. And it says they went and camped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahana Dan to this day. Behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. So Kiriath Jearim, I thought, is Hebron. Nope. Apparently they're going up here, and that's where they're camping. And then they passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And the 5 men who went out to spy the land of the country of Laish said to the king's men, hey, do you know that there are houses and an ephod? So an ephod's probably like worth some money. It's probably like decorum, right? And a household idols and a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore, consider what we should do. And so they turn aside there, and they say, come to the house of the young man, the Levite, in the house of Micah, and ask him how he's doing. And the 600 men armed with weapons of war, who were sons of Dan, stood at the entrance of the gate. So they're just going right up to this guy's house, somewhere up in here. And it says the 5 men who went to spy out the land entered there, and they took the graven image and the ephod and the household idol and the molten image, while the priest stood by the entrance to the gate with 600 armed men with weapons of war. So they're just showing up and like, what are you doing? We don't need to have a conversation about this. We're just taking this stuff, okay? And these went into Micah's house and took the graven image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image. And the priest said to them, what are they doing? Then they said to them, be silent, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. So they're like, be our holy father, be our Catholic priest. They're like, is it better for you to be priest of a house of one man or be priest to a tribe of the family of Israel? So the Danites aren't just like rejects from the rest of them right off the bat. They're starting their own priesthood right off the bat. Now, Moses' grandson already started this without him, so he's wicked to begin with, okay? And for whatever reason, this guy is on the outs with his family, because why is he just wandering around looking for a place? He's probably rebellious. He probably doesn't get along with them. He's probably got a little bit of I'm not the priestly family envy. I don't know what's going on, but he decides to start a priesthood, and now they're just like, well, let's just have our own priesthood. And the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and the household idols and the graven image and went among the people. And they turned and departed and put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. And when they had gone some distance from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house assembled and overtook the sons of Dan. So in other words, the men of that town like ran them down and said, hey, what are you doing? And they cried to the sons of Dan, who turned back and said to Micah, what is the matter with you that you have assembled together? In other words, they just literally walk into his house and take his stuff, and then he comes chasing after him. They look at him like, what is your problem? Like, they just have no idea what his problem is. And he said, you've taken away my gods, which I made and the priests, and have gone away. And what do I have besides? How can you say to me, what is the matter with you? Like, you're just like, what is your problem, dude? And the sons of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, or else fierce men will fall upon you, and you will lose your life with the lives of your household. And it's like, I'm just prophesying this. We're going to kill you if you keep complaining about it, okay? Now, go away. So the sons of Dan went on their way, and the house of Micah saw that they were too strong for them, and they turned and went back from the house. And they took what Micah had made, and the priests who had belonged to him, and came to Laish, and the people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the city with fire. And there was no one to deliver them, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone, and it was in the valley which was near Beth Rehob, and they built the city and lived in it. So who are these people? I don't know. Are they Sidonians? Maybe. I don't know. But they had no one to help them, because they were isolated. And they called the name of the city Dan, and named it after Dan their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city was formerly Laish. Joshua calls it Lashem, so those are probably just two different ways of saying this. Remember, you're going to have people in Israel who speak differently, and they're going to pronounce things differently. I don't know if there's major differences in how they speak among the tribes, or if the Canaanites call it two different things, but some people call it Lashem, some people call it Laish, okay? The sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So these Danites are going to be up here until they go into captivity. Where are all the other Danites? Remember, the Danite armies... No, I'm sorry. This is the one that is led by Dan. The army of Dan is 62,700 men. So they sacked this city with 600. Obviously, a lot more Danites are going to live there, but where do the rest of them go? Okay? Now, by the time you get into the days of David, this number is cut in half, which means even with all their population growth all that time, they're cut in half by them. And what you're going to find out with what happens with these Danites is they immediately get busy. They're up here, and they immediately start mingling in, it looks like, with the people of Tyre, okay? And Naphtali. The last Danite mentioned in the Bible is going to be somebody who's part Danite, part Naphthalite, and part married with Tyre, okay? Tyre, I do not believe, is a Sidonian city, okay? You hear it mentioned for the first time in Joshua, but it's called Sor. It's T-S-O-R, okay? Now, remember the confusion of languages thing. You want to think about those consonants, T, S, and R, okay? You're going to find in the confusion of languages a couple of letters switched around all over the place, okay? So T-R-S is T-S-R. Tyrus, okay? Why is it called Tyre? I believe the people who founded Troy and the Thracians, okay, and so they're going to be up here, are the son of Japheth, called Tyrus, okay? So the land of Thracia is primarily up here, okay? On the other side, because these guys once upon a time were brothers, okay? You're going to have Jabin and Tyrus, okay? These are two sons of Japheth. Jabin's going to be on this side. Tyrus is going to be on this side. But Tyrus seems to set up trade cities, okay? And one of them is going to be Troy, which is going to be so this is all part of Turkey now, but Troy is going to be on this side, so it's right over here. And you can just see, all they're doing is they're just hopping over to the next city over, and now they've got this trade city here, and this trade city is going to be big all around the Aegean until the Achilles and all those guys sack it, okay? Now, Agamemnon, who sacks it, seems to be, I'm guessing, is a descendant of Samson, okay? He's probably a descendant of Samson within about 100 years of Samson, okay? Both his tribe, because I think he's the king of the Spartans. I could be getting my things mixed up. And then there's another people called the Argives. They're both claimed to be descendant of Hercules. Hercules is this guy with a lion's mane and a club, which is seems to be, the timing of it seems to be after Samson killed a bunch of people with a jawbone of a donkey and killed a lion. And so he shows up, and he's known for this, and so he's wearing a lion headdress and carrying a big club because he realized he can do some real damage with the club, okay? And what I think happens is he helps overthrow, he helps King Zeus overthrow the Philistines in Crete, and then he goes up here into what is called Peloponnese, okay? And this is going to be called the Peloponnesian League, and he seems to father two peoples, or father people among these people. And those people seem to become the Spartans and the Argives, okay? The Argives, have you ever heard of the story of Jason and the Argonauts, okay? Those are the Argives, okay? Argonauts means like Argives that sail, I think. And these guys are going to be this Sea League, okay? In this Sea League of people, remember, both of those people are descended from Samson, and this is Tyre. Well, the Danites know that these people from Tyre run trade, okay? So you're going to have Troy here, you're going to have Tyre down here, and the reason they have a city here and here is because all this is controlled by the Hittites, okay? So what they're doing is they're making a way around the Hittites so they can keep trading with these people, because the Hittite, they're free over here. And these people, the Greeks, are free, and some of these people these would have been other sons of Japheth, all up here they're free. But this whole landmass right here is controlled by the Hittites. Remember their map over here? So if you look at this map, all this is controlled by the Hittites. So if they want to trade with these people down here, which is where a ton of wealth is, because this is the intersection of Babylon and Egypt, okay, and the Hittite Empire. So these are the richest people in the world right here. That's why Tyre is so rich, okay? And so these guys want to trade with these people here because then they can get them all the stuff from Europe down here. And we know for a certainty they traded here because in Tel Dan we find stuff, ancient Greek stuff from this period down in Tel Dan, which is, you know, like 30, 40 miles away from this, okay, inland. So what it looks like is you have, see, there's Thrace right here, and you're going to have Troy right around here, and then Troy is basically going to be sailing down to Tyre right here. And all that seems to get set up in the time that the Jews are probably in the Promised Land, because you don't have Tyre mentioned before that, okay? So I think Tyre and Troy are probably sister cities, and then Troy is basically going to, after Agamemnon destroys Troy, he goes to Tyre. Now, it doesn't say what happens when he goes to Tyre, but what it says happens is that this all takes place, the destruction of Troy, around the time that Hiram of Troy has a son married to Solomon, okay? So So he's married in with the Solomonites. They're obviously the Sidonians, and just the people of Tyre are married in with the Danites in general, and the Danites have been sailing with them. So the Danites know these people run trade, okay? Remember, the rest of the Greeks by this time, the Crete is going to be the main part where the sailing Greeks are, okay? You're going to have, this is Elisi, this is Elisha, this is one of the sons of Dan, and then Crete, which is going to be, I think the Kittim are going to be there. Those are going to be the main places that they are, okay? And these people are going to be dominated by the Egyptians, the Coptic Egyptians, and Caftor of the Copts is going to be where the Philistines come from, okay? And the Caftorites are going to take this over. And so the Greeks aren't really much of a sailing power at this time because the Philistines are running them over here, and then you have the Thracians and Troy over here. And so you do have Greeks in the sailing, but they're not the dominant ones because you have the people in Tarshish. They're way over in Spain by this time. And they set up these colonies right away, but the main hubs to get to everything else, which are going to be Cyprus and Crete, get taken over by the Egyptians, okay? And when the Danites, who were part of Avaris, they were the ones who helped the Egyptians take this over. This sea trade of the Egyptians that took over this stuff seems to have been led by Jews from Avaris in the first place, which probably were the Danites, okay? And you have these people among the Egyptians that are called danites. These are these women who are apparently married to these princes of Egypt that all got killed, and the story is that they murdered them, and it's a story that has to do with Hercules and Aegyptus and these wives murdering them, and all this is a corrupted story of the firstborn of Egypt dying, okay? And these danites are apparently Danites who are still married to the Egyptians, okay? Remember how the Egyptians are going to talk about driving out Hyksos from Avaris after the Jews leave, okay? Now, there are some Hyksos that are still there, and they're probably Danites, okay? So you have a bunch of Danites come out, but you still have Danites there because they were married in the Egyptians the whole time, and they were involved with the sea trade the whole time. And so what happens is the Danites seem to get involved in the sea trade right off the bat. They've got this city here. They have access to Tyre, and they covet what Tyre has because they know Troy is their main hub, okay? Troy is the connection between Tyre and Thrace, which Thrace is basically, I mean, you have light, sparse little tribes of Germanic peoples and Celtic peoples that are starting to spread up here, but Thrace is going to be the main European tribes, okay? You don't have a bunch of people in Italy growing big yet, and you have Tarshish, you probably have these tiny little colonies and stuff like this, but Thrace is a big people group that expands up into Europe. So the main point of trade between Europe and the Middle East is going to be Troy and Tyre, okay? And the Danites say, we want that, okay? So the Danites seem to overthrow Crete and Elisha, or Cyprus, and then Samson seems to father the Argives and the Spartans. And the Argives and the Spartans are going to team up about 100 years later. Remember, this is around the time that Solomon's building his temple, okay? And they're going to overthrow Troy. And then King Agamemnon is going to come next to Tyre. Now, what is he coming to Tyre for? He's probably coming there in somewhat of a diplomatic sense to see if they're going to cause trouble or if he needs to overthrow them too, okay? And what happens from there is that the Greeks, the Peloponnesian League, become the new trade power in the East. And this leads to what is called the Bronze Age collapse, because here's what's happening. The Bronze Age collapse is basically this route of, remember the people of Tarshish are getting tin from Spain and England, okay? And they're mixing it with Cyprus, which is known to have a bunch of copper. The other main place that they're getting a bunch of tin and copper, the Hittites all control. Well, these Danites are going to eventually overthrow Hattusa, which is the capital of the Hittites, and the Hittites are going to fall apart. So that trade network diminishes. And then this trade network diminishes because the Danites basically take it over. Okay? Or they at least overthrow it, and then the Greeks take it over. Okay? But you're going to have a good, generation or two where things are getting reestablished after all this stuff is getting overthrown. And so the main two sources of bronze are gone, and that's what causes the Bronze Age collapse, okay? And when it reemerges after the Bronze Age collapse, you're now going to have it's called the Mycenaean League, which are these people who are in Peloponnese, which is this southern part of Greece, are now running the trade all over. And from them, you're going to have a new reorder trade, and that's how the Greeks get colonies all over here. Meanwhile, Tyre is going to, Troy's gone. The Trojans claim that some people from their land came over here and were eventually involved in the founding of Rome, which is honestly probably true. I think Etruscan and Thracian are just transliterations of each other, okay? Tyre is going to, this is going to happen in the days of Jezebel. Remember, Jezebel is a Sidonian. I believe the people of Tyre are from Tyrus, okay? And Tyrus is just like this city that was originally on an island off the coast, and then the island built a bridge to the mainland. So it seems to be just a trade port, okay? But it keeps growing, and it becomes a very rich trade port with a big walled city and stuff like that, and that's how it becomes famous. Well, the king of Tyre actually gets overthrown and murdered by, I think, Jezebel's dad or grandpa or something like that. And before that happens, Jezebel's aunt, because they're married in, you're going to have a priesthood and a royal family here, okay? And Jezebel is from the priesthood of Baal, okay? And those seem to be the old Canaanite Sidonians. Well, they're going to take that over before Jezebel marries Ahab. And Jezebel's aunt is going to go down here and found Carthage. So that's what people do when they get overthrown. You're going to have people from the royal family who have people who are loyal to them and following them, and they're going to go somewhere else. And because they know how to govern, they know how to organize, they know how to trade, and they have connections in places, they're going to come somewhere else and set up a new royal line somewhere. And they set up what becomes the Carthaginian Empire over here. And that Carthaginian Empire seems to come from Tyre, while the Roman Empire seems to come from Troy, and they're all descendants of Tyrus, who basically become the Trojan and the Carthage, who fight for each other, and the Romans are going to win and take over the whole Mediterranean, okay? All of this seems to trickle down to what the Danites did, okay? The Danites, again, they're so low-key, but they're everywhere, okay? And it all starts with this mystery of what happened to these 60,000 warriors, and the answer is they become the Sea Peoples. And you can tell because in Deborah and Barak, they say how they wouldn't come help them fight because they wouldn't get off their ships, okay? So they become the Sea Peoples, and they're basically Viking raiders, okay? And they're going to keep being Viking raiders, and I believe Denmark is the Danites. I think that's the Viking raiders. They just keep traveling around and Viking raiding people, and they might possibly be the priesthood that they started at Dan might possibly be the Druids, okay? And the Druids pre-existed what would be, I mean, for centuries they pre-existed probably monastic stuff and probably stuff that became the Freemasons. That would be my guess, because these are secret mystery cults. These are secret mystery cults, and all a secret mystery cult is a religion that went underground, okay? It's a religion that went underground. It's probably still adapting and grabbing stuff from other religions, but it seems to be the Danites become, and they might, so some people think the Druids might be related to the Pythagorean cult that was in Italy that burned to the ground with all the disciples inside, and that the remnants of that became the Druids, and that's possible too. But Pythagoras, who was the founder of all that, was born in Tyre. He was born in Tyre, and so was Thales of Miletus, who was his teacher. He was born in Tyre, and he becomes the first. He's regarded as the first philosopher in the pre-Socratic tradition, and Pythagoras is the first guy to call himself a philosopher. So they all come from Tyre, where the Danites are mixing, and so they very well could be either taught by or influenced by, or actually be Danites. Okay, we don't know for sure. We just know what cities they're from and what gods they're dedicated to, basically. But the religious mixing that becomes Zeus and Apollo and all this stuff, remember, who's right at the intersection with a priesthood, okay? Because we know the Canaanite cults are getting overthrown, with the exception of the Sidonians, okay? We know the Babylonians and the Mitanni and all these other stuff are getting thrown, but you have a priesthood that exists right here at the intersection of the cult of Baal, the area where the storm god appeared, right up. I mean, this is literally right in the region where the bull of heaven would have been, and all of a sudden you have a god that shows up among the Greeks and gets associated with King Zeus, who can transform into a bull, apparently kidnap people from Tyre. This is the whole story of Europa, is about a woman kidnapped from Tyre, and impregnate women and create the Minotaur bull in Crete, which is kind of a Nephilim. Okay, so it's who's the priesthood that exists right here, who's mingling with all these people who seem to be mixing these stories together, and I'm going to say it's this Danite priesthood. I think this Danite priesthood is a mystery cult, and it keeps mixing stuff from Babylon, from the Canaanites, and from the Greeks, and that becomes Zeus. That's where I believe it comes from. Okay, so that's a lot of aside to get back to the point. So it says, in Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and you're going to find some Bibles, like the Revised Standard Version, they know it's Moses. They know it's Moses, and they're right. The son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests of the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. I think the ESV actually calls it the son of Moses too, because this is the Septuagint and other versions just say it's Moses. Okay, the Jews admitted changing the name they added a little symbol that made it look like Manasseh, because they didn't want to profane the name of Moses. Okay, so and the Danites of that tribe were there until the Danites went into captivity, so they maintained Micah's idol that they made as long as the house of God was in Shiloh. So what God is this? What God is this? We don't know. But what we do know is that eventually they're going to get a golden calf there when Jehu makes 2 golden calves, one in Bethel and one in Dan. Okay, so he makes the calves in Bethel and Dan because he knows, first of all, he's making a competitive priesthood. Okay, remember Shiloh used to be where the tabernacle is. Now everything's in Jerusalem. Okay, and so you had a tradition of people going up to Shiloh, which was in Ephraim. And it's right here, and so he's setting up Bethel as a priesthood there. Why? So the people can go up there and worship and not be tempted to keep going to Jerusalem. And then the other one is up in Dan. So no matter if you're north or south, you have a place you can do a pilgrimage up to, not leave the land of northern Israel, and worship a god. Well, here now they have 2 gods here. Okay, they have whatever graven image this guy made that says it's got the household idols. So household idols seem to be little icons of your ancestors. And then he's got this graven image of whatever it is. Okay, it doesn't say. And then this golden calf. Okay, so you've got a bull, and then you've got this other image. Okay, this is important because in Sidon, or I'm sorry, in Zoroastrianism, which is at this time forming and evolving in the East, you have an original 2 gods that are under God, and one is a man and one is a bull. Could that have been influenced by the Danites? Possibly, because we don't know where they're traveling and merging from there. Okay, but what we do know is they've got 2 gods. They've got one idol, and then they've got a calf or a bull. Okay, and it's possible that they become Zeus and Apollos. It's very possible that that's what they do. They make one. They merge Nimrod into the one. To become Apollos. We know the Trojans very much worship Apollos, who seems to be Nimrod, or based on Nimrod, or at least his legend gets merged with Nimrod, and he's the sun god. And then the Zeus is obviously worshipped among the people of Greece, who is based on King Zeus of Crete. Okay, we know he's an actual person in Crete, and he gets associated with a bull. So who are these guys? I don't know, but it seems like it's Samson is Hercules, Zeus is merged with this bull, and Baal. So that's literally the god of the Sidonians, and this calf bull that they have, which is the Apis bull from Egypt. And then there's another god, whatever this idol is. We don't know what this mysterious idol is. I don't know. But you can tell they're mixing and merging religions together. They're making up religions, and that's what goes down. And that's what happens with the Danites immediately after they enter the land. This is Moses' young grandson immediately entering the land. He's probably a man in his 20s or 30s when this happens, okay? Now, in those days, there was no kings in Israel. Now, this is what's going to go down with Benjamin, and this is going to bring us back to Ehud, and that's where I'm going to quit, okay? Now, in those days, there was no king in Israel, and a certain Levite residing in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. So we're back in Bethlehem again, okay? So you got another Levite who takes a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. Now, this might be the same Levite. And the fact that he gets his concubine raped to death might be the reason he leaves and goes and says, screw Israel. I'm going to go and join with the Danites. I don't know, but this happens right after they get in the land because Phinehas is still the priest when this happens, okay? So you have two stories of a Levite from Bethlehem and Judah. Two stories, okay, right next to each other of a Levite from Bethlehem, Judah, okay? Now, there's obviously going to be more Levites in Bethlehem and Judah, but this guy takes a concubine. And his concubine became angry with him and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there for 4 months. So this is where the Levite comes from. It's Bethlehem in Judah. Okay? So, could be a totally different guy. Could be the same guy. But this guy has a concubine in Bethlehem in Judah. Okay? And his concubine became angry with him and she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there some 4 months. Now, remember when the Danites find this priest who's with this guy Micah, they recognize his voice, okay? He's Moses' grandson. How does everybody know this guy, though? Just because he's Moses' grandson, why do these Danites know him, okay? We understand Moses is famous, but Moses he's been dead now for 30, 40 years, okay? We would understand that his grandchildren would be known who they are, but how would people know them so much as to recognize the voice? Well, this guy apparently gets all of Israel to go to war and destroy Benjamin. Okay? Maybe that's why. And I don't know if it's the same guy. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying both of these stories happen around the same time, and they both involve a Levite from Bethlehem, Judah. Okay? Who is named in the one, but he's not named here. Okay? So anyways, but his concubine became angry with him. She went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah, and was there for 4 months. Then her husband set out after her to speak tenderly to her and to bring her back, and had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys. When he reached her father's house, the girl's father saw him and came with joy to meet him. His father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay and remained with him 3 days, and he ate and drank there and stayed there. And on the 4th day he got up early in the morning and prepared to go, and the girl's father said to the son-in-law, fortify yourself with a bit of food, and after that you may go. And the two men sat and ate and drank together, and the girl's father said to the man, why not spend the night and enjoy yourself? When the man got up to go to his father-in-law and kept urging him until he spent the night there again, on the 5th day he got up early in the morning to leave, and the girl's father said, fortify yourself. So they lingered and that day and declined, and the two of them ate and drank. So he kept saying, eat some food, you'll feel better. And he keeps getting him to eat and drink and stay. Why? He just doesn't want him to leave for whatever reason. Now this is why I'm saying you've got the grandson of Moses, who's a young man who's wandering away looking for something to do. He seems to be on the outs with this family. Whatever's going on with this guy, you have this other guy who seems to be wandering around. He's got a concubine, which is basically a girl he slept with, but he's not married to. Okay? When the man and his concubine and his servant got up to leave, so he's got a servant, his father-in-law, the father's girl, said to him, look, the day has worn until it is almost evening. Spend the night. See, the day has drawn to a close. Spend the night here and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up early in the morning and go to your journey and go home. But the man would not spend the night, and he got up and arrived opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem, so it's called Jebus again. Remember how it talks about how the Judahites destroyed it, but then it says the Benjamites didn't occupy it, so the Jebusites apparently just rebuilt. Okay? And he had with him a couple of saddled donkeys, and his concubine was with him. And they went near Jebus, and the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, come, let us turn to the side of the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it. And they're like, no. But his master said to him, we will not turn aside into this city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel. We will continue on to Gibeah. Okay? Let's look at Gibeah. So Gibeah is going to be where Saul comes from. Remember Gibeon, which is, if you look at here, it's if you're heading towards Jebus or Jerusalem, okay? Gibeah is the next city on your way, okay? They're coming from Bethlehem in Judah, which is down here. They're going to pass by Jebus, and they're going to go to Gibeah. Now, Gibeah is the next city over from Gibeon, which are the people who conned him into sparing him, okay? So there's Jebusites here, there's Gibeonites here, but Gibeah is full of Benjamites, okay? So whoever these people are who get rapey, they could just be Benjamites. There could be Benjamites who are married in with Gibeonites. We don't know. But it says, and he said to a servant, come, let us try to reach one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or Ramah. So there's Gibeah, there's Ramah. So those are the next two cities up. So they move on, okay? And so they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down to them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, and they turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. And he went and sat down in the open square of the city, but no one took them in to spend the night. Then at evening there was an old man coming from his work in the field, and the man was from a hill country of Ephraim, and he was residing in Gibeah. So again, you see hill country of Ephraim. So this is all these two stories are very close to one another, okay? So the hill country of Ephraim, he's coming in from the work. What is he doing out in the hills? Logging, farming, sheep herding, who knows, right? And it says the people of the place were Benjamites. So apparently these men were all Benjamites. They're not foreigners here. And he says, and when the old man looked up and saw the wayfarer in the open square of the city, he said, where are you going and where do you come from? And he answered them, we are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, and from which I come. So that's where he's from. He's from the hill country of Ephraim. He's going down to Bethlehem, Judah to get his wife, and he's going back to the hill country of Ephraim, okay? So I just want you to see the, I'm not making a claim here, but I want you to understand the similarities of the story. You have two guys from Bethlehem, Judah, Levites, going to the hill country of Ephraim, okay? He apparently is from there. He's going there to get his concubine, and then he's going back. The other story has a Levite from Bethlehem, Judah, who is going to the hill country of Ephraim, okay? And he says, I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to my home. Nobody has offered to take me in. So apparently he's from there, okay? Now remember, the hill country of Ephraim is also where Shiloh is, and that would probably be where the family of Moses and all that stuff would be, okay? So he says, nobody has offered to take me in. We, your servants, have straw and fodder for our donkeys and bread and wine for me and this woman and the young man along with us. We need nothing more. So it's him, his young servant, and this woman, okay? And the old man said, peace be to you. I will take care of all your wants, only do not spend the night in the square. So he brought him into his house and fed the donkeys, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. And while they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city, a perverse lot, surrounded the house, started pounding on the door, and said to the old man, bring out the man who came into your house that we may have intercourse with him. We want to screw this guy, okay? Why? They're exactly like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. How did they get this way so fast? I don't know, but this is crazy. They're immediately like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and this is right after they got into the land, okay? The man and the master of the house went out to them and said to them, no, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Since this man is my guest, do not do this vile thing. Now remember, the Canaanites and the Amorites and the Nephilim were known for being like this, okay? And they're killing them all, but maybe their demons are still around, right? Maybe there's demons still around that are driven like this. And if this theory that demons are basically the disembodied spirits of Nephilim, which kind of plays, I mean, it makes sense. The Bible doesn't expressly teach it, but it does kind of make sense. Like, you can put it together in conjecture, because if they don't go to Sheol, but they're disembodied spirits of the dead, and then the Bible makes note of these things called shades, which it translates them to devils, but a shade, it literally is the ghost of a dead person. That's what a shade is. And then these other demons called fawns, which are half human, half goat. like satyrs and stuff like that. They're satyrs or fauns or whatever. Like those are the things they call demons, and both of those seem to speak to Nephilim, dead Nephilim. Okay, but anyways, we'll see. Who knows? He says, "Here's my virgin daughter and concubine. Let me bring them out and now ravish them and do whatever you want to them, but do not do such a vile thing." So raping a dude is very bad, but apparently go ahead and rape his concubine. Okay. Now, I don't know. I mean, this guy is probably pretty tired because his girl's on his donkey, and he's walking this entire time. So he's walking from Bethlehem, passing Jebus, and going to Gibeah. He's probably super tired, and he's probably giving him wine. This guy's probably out cold, right? But he's literally going to give him his own virgin daughter and the other guy's concubine, just rape him, okay? But don't do this to these guys. Then he says, but the men would not listen to him, so the man seized his concubine and put her out to them. In other words, he forcefully grabbed this other guy's concubine and shoved her out the door. Okay? They wantonly raped her and abused her all through the night until morning, and as the dawn began to break, they let her go. The woman, as morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. Okay, so she just collapses there. And in the morning, the master got up, opened the door of the house, and he went out to go on his way. He just leaves. Time to get back to work. Okay? There was his concubine lying dead at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. Help, let me in. Get up, he said to her, we're going. But there was no answer. So it seems like this guy knew she was out there getting raped. And she's there lying at the threshold. He's not like, what are you doing outside of the house lying there on the threshold? She's there with her hands laying on the threshold of the door, okay? And he's like, come on, let's go. You think she's just taking a nap there? What? He seems to have known she was getting raped. He put her on his donkey, and the man set out for his home. Now, I don't know about you, but there was a time when I was a teenager, and me and a bunch of friends witnessed a woman getting beaten by a man. And the man was big and older than us, but there were like 15 of us, and we were all a bunch of punks and didn't like just go beat the crap out of him. Instead, we left and called the police, okay? And every one of us had been in fistfights, and every one of us considered ourselves kind of tough for our age. But literally, one of our friends just said, man, we're a bunch of bitches, or something like that, right? And the reason he said this is because we watched this guy grab this woman by first she gets out of his car and he smacks her, and we see this, and that's why we come. And then we basically were like, the woman was just like, will you guys walk with me so I can call the police? And so we started walking with her, and then he comes and just grabs her by the hair and just pulls her back in the car and drives off. And we literally were just terrified kids, because you think you're tough when you're, a teenager, 15 through 18-year-old, but the reality is you're tiny, okay? The reality is like when I was like 25 to 30, I could play football with high school kids and just manhandle them, and I was never even on the football team. But I worked in a factory, and you're just so much bigger and so much stronger. I could literally just throw these kids around like it was nothing, okay? The reality is a grown man versus a teenager is so much stronger. I don't care if that kid he hits weights and stuff like that. It doesn't matter. Your bone density is bigger. Your muscle mass is bigger. You don't even have to work out to be able to beat the crap out of some kid who's a teenager and lifts weights and plays football. Because these kids can run and throw themselves at another little kid and knock them down and stuff like that, but they don't know how to handle their body, and they just don't have nearly the muscle mass you have, okay? But the point is, we were little kids, and we felt like such punks, and we were ashamed of ourselves for, like, getting in fights and stuff, but, like, 15 of us couldn't rescue one woman from one man. Or we're too scared to, basically. And we called the police like a bunch of little... Definitely not gangster, okay? But we were kids, okay? Now... That's how I still feel that shame to this day. There were 15 of us. If one of us just started throwing down, the rest would have jumped in. But we were just scared and nobody would go first, right? Here's a guy who's sitting here his concubine, who he intends to marry, gets raped to death while he's inside. Glad it's not him. I can imagine the shame this guy is carrying. Okay? And it's insurmountable to me, the amount of shame he's carrying. The fact that it happens to Israel is what he addresses, but the amount of shame he's carrying seems like insurmountable. Okay? But he also has a hatred for Israel for letting something so bad happen in Israel and nobody doing anything about it. Okay? This city didn't get like this overnight, and it's not unknown that these people are like this. Okay? So what happens? He's making a statement now. He says, "Get up, we're going," and there was no answer. And then he put her on the donkey and set for his home. So he goes home to the hill country of Ephraim. This is where he is. Remember, this is where the other Levite appears from Bethlehem, Judah. Okay? And then he says, he enters into the house, he took a knife, and grasping his concubine, he cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb. He's just cutting her up. And sent her throughout the territory of Israel. What'd you get in the mail today? A thigh of a woman. What the frick? And he sends her out to all of Israel, okay? And he commanded the men whom he sent, saying, "Thus shall you say to the Israelites, such has a thing ever happened since the day of the Israelites came up from Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak out." He's like, are you going to let Israel become Sodom and Gomorrah? Okay? So he's not only full of shame, he's full of bitterness. Okay? I want you to understand that you have this guy who's full of shame, full of bitterness, and doesn't really have anything. And we don't really know what happens to him after this. But then you have this other guy in the hill country of Ephraim who's also a Levite from Benjamin, Judah, starts a counterfeit priesthood. I'm saying consider the possibility that they're the same guy. Okay? They very well may not be, but consider the possibility that they are. Then all the Israelites came out from Dan to Beersheba, okay? Now, maybe it's not because he's saying from Dan to Beersheba, but from Dan to Beersheba is a figure of speech, okay? That's literally saying from it's like saying from the four corners of the earth, but it's talking about Israel, okay? So when they say when all the Israelites came out from Dan to Beersheba, okay? That's literally saying from end to end, okay? Dan is the extreme north. Beersheba is a Simeonite city in the extreme south. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean that Dan is named Dan at this time. Could be, though. This could be afterwards, and this just happens to be another Levite in Bethlehem, Judah, in the hill countries of Manasseh, and this could be going on. Okay? But it says, including the land of Gilead. So Gilead, remember, these people are kind of half related to the Jews, so it's kind of a big deal that they're coming too. And the congregation assembled in one body before the people at Mizpah. So here's Mizpah. Remember, you have this happening. He was going to try to get to Ramah, but they all assemble at Mizpah. So this is apparently the hill country of Ephraim where he is from. Okay? So it would be a lot easier if we knew the name of this guy, if we knew that where this house of Micah was in the hill country of Ephraim, and what's going on here. But Mizpah is where he is, okay? And he said, and the chiefs of all the people, all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people, 400,000 foot soldiers bearing arms. So they mean business here. 400,000 is a lot of people, okay? The entire army of Israel, when they enter into the land, I think is something like 400,000 or 500,000, okay? So it seems like this is almost everybody, okay? Now the Benjamites heard that the people of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the Israelites said, "Tell us, how did this criminal act come about?" And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, came and said, "I came to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, and I and my concubine spent the night. The lords of Gibeah," okay? Now let's look at what it says in the interlinear. The Baal. The lords of Gibeah, okay? The Baal of Gibeah. So it seems to be like these were main people in this place. Doesn't name any of them, but what we do know is by the end of this. Let's see how many kids Benjamin has. So when they're in Egypt, Benjamin has Bela, Becher, Ashel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupim, Humin, and Ard. Okay? These are all his sons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He has 10 sons. Okay? By the time you get to the book of Chronicles, there's only 3 of them mentioned. So it looks like these were probably heads of the families of the Benjamites who were just very wicked, and he just entirely wipes them out. Okay? He said, they beset my house round about upon me at night and thought to have slain me. But that's another good way to say raped you. But slain you, and my concubine they have forced, in other words, they raped her, that until she was dead. They raped my concubine until she was dead. And I took my concubine and cut her into pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. They did nasty in Israel. Zimmah, heinous crime, and foolishness, villainy. They did nasty stuff in Israel, and they took my. So anyways, he said, "Behold, you are all children of Israel. Give your advice and counsel." In other words, what are you going to do about this? And all the people arose as one man, said, "We will not go any of us into his tent, neither any of us turn to his house. But now this shall be the thing which will happen in Gibeah. We'll go up by lot against it." And we will take 10 men of 100 through all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000, and fetch food for all the people. In other words, we're doing a military campaign here, and that they may do. And when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly that they have wrought in Israel, so the men of Israel were gathered against the city and knit together as one man. Now, I really don't get why they're doing this the way they're doing this. They don't seem to be inquiring of the Lord much, because why are you have this city, and you have 400,000 people. This city is not that big, okay? It's probably a decent-sized city. Probably got some decent walls and stuff like that. But you have 400,000 people. Go orc on this thing. Like, get out your Uruk-hai shields and get out your battering rams and just tear this thing to shreds. Why don't you do that? I don't know. Apparently these Benjamites are lefties, and boy, can they throw rocks. Okay? So he says, I will take 10 men of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000. Fetch victuals of the people, that they may do when they come to... some of these words are so bad. This is why, I am not so anti critical text versions and modern translations that I think you have to use the King James all the time, because sometimes they just sound stupid when you're reading the Old Testament. I'll bring provisions for the troops who are going to repay Gibeah of Benjamin for all the disgrace they have done to Israel. So they're going to do to Gibeah, repay Benjamin, all that they've done. So it's not. So they're going to do what? Okay. So all the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout all the tribes of Benjamin, saying, "What crime is this that has been committed among you? And now then, hand over these scoundrels in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not listen to their kinsfolk, the Israelites. The Benjamites came together out of the towns to Gibeah to go out to battle against the Israelites. Now, the Benjamites are already one of the smaller tribes in Israel. Okay? When they come out of Egypt, they're 35,000. When they go into the Promised Land, they're 45,000. So they have grown. The Benjamites make kids. They're apparently, you saw how many kids Benjamin had. So they have 70 total descendants that go into Egypt, and 11 of them are Benjamin and his kids, and he's the youngest. Okay. Benjamin was apparently a very horny dude, okay? Because he's got tons of kids, okay? And now they're in the promised land, and almost everybody else either stayed the same or went down, because they have about the same size army when they go in and when they go out, okay? But the Benjamites have like 30% more people, okay? Because the Benjamites are horny dudes. So apparently, when they get their land and they settle down a little bit, they are still very horny, and they get to just having indiscretion issues about where they manage their comeuppance. So these Benjamins are like, hey, a Benjamin's got to do what a Benjamin's got to do. It's all about the Benjamins, okay? And they don't. They're like, no. We realize that these guys raped a woman to death just for passing through their town because they wanted to rape the dude. But we're Benjamites. Benjamins just get this way, man. And they're apparently pretty bad. And so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go up against Gibeon, and we're going to repay Benjamin for all his grace. They show up with a big, huge bunch of men, and the Benjamins are like, no, let's do this. Let's do this. There's 45,000 of us. There's 400,000 of you, but let's do this. Okay, we're in Benjamite territory right now. Let's see what you got. And the Benjamites came together out of the towns of Gibeah to go to battle against the Israelites. And on the day, the Benjamites mustered 26,000 armed men from the towns, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah. Okay. Now remember, there were 45,000 when they went in there, so this is not all the Benjamites everywhere. It's not like all of them are wicked, but it's not gonna go well for them. Of all this force, there were 700 picked men who were left-handed. 700. Remember, Ehud is left-handed. Okay, 700 of these men are left-handed. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. So these guys were apparently amazing with slings. Okay, and the Israelites, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 armed men, all of them warriors. So apparently, your shields could not stop their rocks. And the fact that you were 10 to 1 was 20. There's 25,000. They're like 18 to 1. Okay. Nope. We're gonna do this strategically. We're gonna go in with a scalpel. And the Israelites proceeded to go up to Bethel, where they inquired of God. Now you're inquiring of God. Which of us shall go up first to battle against the Benjamites? And the Lord answered, Judah shall go up first. It's always about Judah. Judah is the leader. Okay. He is the one who's going to get the rod of authority. Judah needs to deal with this. And then the Israelites got up in the morning and camped against Gibeah, and the Israelites went out to battle against Benjamin, and the Israelites drew up the battle line against Gibeah. Now, remember how Judah was the one who was going to offer his life in exchange for Benjamin? Now he's like, now go have Judah kill Benjamin. And the Benjamites came out of Gibeah and struck down that day 22,000 Israelites. Holy crap. That's like a 1-for-1. There's like a 25,000 of them, okay? And apparently they just crushed them. 25,000 people struck down 22,000 of Judah, okay? And the Israelites took courage and again formed the battle line in the same place where they formed it on the first day. Now, maybe that's what, like, of all the people in the book of Judges, the Judahites don't really get involved until the days of David. Maybe that's why they're so weakened. I mean, they lost 22,000. That's like a third of the Judahites went up first. They lost like a third of their army. Because the Judahites are probably going to be like 75,000 people. But they lost 22,000 like that in a day. The Israelites took courage and again formed a battle line in the same place where they had formed it on the first day. And the Israelites went up in before the Lord until the evening. They said, shall we again draw near to the battle against our kinfolk, the Benjamites? And the Lord said, go up. Now it seems to be the Judahites going up again. So the Israelites advanced against the Benjamites the second day, and Benjamin moved out against them from Gibeah and the second day and struck down 18,000 of the Israelites, all of them armed to battle. So if these are all Judahites, they have just lost 40,000 people. That's like half the Judahite army. Now, it seems like Judah's leading the army because they're talking about taking 10 out of 1,000 and blah, blah, blah. So it seems like it's a diverse army. But still, they just took out 10% of this 400,000 man army with their 25,000 dudes. Then all the Israelites and the whole army went back to Bethel and wept, sitting before the Lord. And they fasted day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed well-being before the Lord. So apparently these guys are rapey sodomites, but they can fight like nobody can fight before. It's almost like God is like not happy with us in general that we let it get this bad, and he's making sure we all suffer for it. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord, for the Ark of the Covenant of God was there in those days, so that's in Bethel apparently, not in Shiloh. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, okay? Now this is important. Remember the other guy, the other Levite from Micah, okay? He is the son of Gershom, which would have been Eleazar's cousin, okay? Phinehas is the son of Aaron, and Eleazar is his son. Gershom is the son of Moses, and that guy would have been, no, I'm sorry. That would have been before this. Because if Phinehas is the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the other guy is a young man, and he's the son of Gershom. He could have been Gershom's son in his old age, and Gershom would have been at least between 40 and 80 when they go into the Promised Land. So he could have been a son of his in his old age. But the point is, generation-wise, he would have been Eleazar, the son of Aaron. He would have been the same generation as Phinehas. Phinehas is priest, but he was in the book of Numbers, so it's been at least 20, 30 years since then. So Phinehas would be an old man, and this guy's a young man. So it looks like the other guy would have been his son in his old age, Gershom's son in his old age, and it was probably sometime before this, because Phinehas, it talks about Eleazar dying right after Joshua dies, okay? So Phinehas, it says, shall we go out and battle against our kinfolk, the Benjamites, or shall we desist? And the Lord says, go up tomorrow, for I will give them into your hand. So that tithe I just took of your entire army, the Lord says, was just so you know I'm not happy with you guys letting it get this bad. Okay? Now you can get them. And Israel stationed men in an ambush around Gibeah. And, oh, now you're thinking of doing smart things like an ambush, okay, after getting your butts handed to you twice. Then the Israelites went up against the Benjamites on the third day, and they set themselves in array against Gibeah as before. And when the Benjamites went out against the army, they were drawn away from the city, and before they began to inflict casualties on the troops along the main roads, one which goes up to Bethel and to Gibeah. So apparently the road between Bethel and Gibeah, they're kicking butt all up and down this road. And as well as in the open country, killing about 30 men of Israel, the Benjamites thought, they're being routed before us as previously, but the Benjamites said, let us retreat and draw them away from the city towards the road. But the Israelites said that. And so apparently they came in and got some people to attack them, and then 30 of those people died. And they looked like they were kicking them butt and chasing them away. But they're actually just drawing them away from the city. And they drew back the battle line to Baal Tamar. It's the Lord Tamar. Don't know where that is. While those Israelites were in the ambush, rushed out from their place west of Geba. So this is Geba, and they are to the west of it. So apparently they're over here, and Gibeah is up here, and they're chasing them towards Bethel. And Gibeah comes out and jumps on them, or Geba. And there came against Gibeah 10,000 picked men of Israel. And the battle was fierce, but the Benjamites did not realize disaster was close upon them. The Lord defeated the Benjamin before Israel, and the Israelites destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day, all of them armed. So that entire army they wiped out. Remember, they gathered about 25,000 people, okay? Then the Benjamites saw that they were defeated, and the Israelites gave ground to Benjamin because they trusted to the troops in ambush that they had stationed against Gibeah. And the troops in ambush rushed quickly upon Gibeah, so they were getting ready to run back to Gibeah because they're getting their butts kicked. And they put the whole city to the sword. They killed everyone in Gibeah. Now, the agreement between the main body of Israel and the men in ambush was that they set up a cloud of smoke out of the city, and the main body of Israel should turn in battle. But Benjamin had begun to inflict the casualties on the Israelites, killing about 30 of them. So they said, surely we are defeated before us as in the first battle. But when the column of smoke began to rise out of the city, the Benjamites looked behind them, and there was the whole city going up in smoke towards the sky. So apparently people were jumping the city while people were jumping the army. Okay. Now, Gibeah is going to be where Saul comes from. So Gibeah actually is an ancestor of Saul. And so it seems to be this is the main capital city of the Benjamites here, okay? Now when the main body of Israel turned and the Benjamites were dismayed, for they saw that disaster was close upon them, therefore they turned away from the Israelites in the direction of the wilderness, but the battle overtook them, and those who came out of the city were slaughtering them between, cutting down the Benjamites. They pursued them from Nohah and tread them down as far as in the east place of Gibeah. Okay, so I don't know where Nohah is. Maybe that's Nob. I don't know. It's not in here. But it says 18,000 Benjamites fell, all of them courageous fighters. Okay, so remember the whole Benjamite army is like 45,000. That first day they gathered like 25,000 together, but all the rest are gathering. But now they've killed 25,100 plus 18,000, so that's how many the Judites fell too. And this is almost their entire army. Plus the people of the city of Gibeah, which is their capital, okay? So they have killed a lot of Benjamites. Then they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. So here's the rock of Rimmon. So they're fleeing into the wilderness. Like they're literally trying to get out of Israel altogether, okay? So they're heading over here. They're heading back towards Jericho and all that to get out of Israel, okay? So it says they turned and fled towards the wilderness of the rock of Rimmon. 5,000 of them were cut down in the main roads, and they pursued them as far as Gedam, and 2,000 of them were slain. So that they have roughly killed the entire Benjamite army that came into Israel. Assuming this is a generation later and it's not much bigger, okay? So they've now killed. Remember, they were something like 45,000 when they came in. They have now killed like 47,000 people. Okay, so that's the entire Benjamite army. Okay. So all that fell from Benjamin that day were 25,000 arms-bearing men, all of them courageous fighters. So I don't get this. You have 5,000, you have 2,000. Oh, so apparently it's 25,100, and then this is just the breakdown of how they got killed. So it's 25,100 total. And of that day fell 25,000 arm-bearing men, all of them courageous fighters, but 600 turned and fled towards the wilderness of the rock of Rimmon and remained at the rock of Rimmon 4 months. So apparently these guys went over here into the wilderness and they're sitting up on a mountain somewhere hiding. Okay. Meanwhile, the Israelites turned back against the Benjamites and put them to the sword, the city, the people, the animals, and all that remained, and the remaining towns they set on fire. So that's the Benjamite capital city. Now they're killing all the surrounding towns. Okay. They're destroying them all, the animals, everything. They're doing them like God told them to do the Canaanites. Okay. So the Israelites had sworn at Mizpah. This is where they started out with all this. No one of us shall give his daughter in marriage to Benjamin. And the people came to Bethel and sat there an evening before the God, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. Now, when you swear something to God, you got to do it, right? And he says nobody is going to give their daughters to Benjamin to marry, okay? Now, remember, they have killed all of the Benjamites except for these 600 men who are at the rock of Rimmon, okay? Men, women, children, cattle, everything. They have killed everything Benjamite except for 600 men. Okay? And they said, O Lord, the God of Israel, why has it come to pass that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel? They realize they have entirely wiped out a tribe. Okay? Except for these 600 men that are left. Okay? And then they have sworn to never give their wives to any of them, so they can't repopulate. Okay? And he says, on that day the people got up early and built an altar there and offered burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being. Peace offerings. And the children of Israel said, who is there among the tribes of Israel that came not up with the congregation unto the Lord? For they had made a great oath concerning him that came up not to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, he shall surely be put to death. So here's how they're going to solve the problem. They're going to figure out, wait, when we said everybody from all the tribes of Israel and all the clans of Israel need to come up to the Lord and contribute to this campaign against Benjamin, who didn't come. And the children of Israel repented them for their brother and said, there is one tribe that's cut off from Israel that day. How shall we do for them to make wives for them that remain, seeing that we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters for wives? Okay, so we swore we wouldn't give them our daughters, but they'll be entirely wiped out if they don't get some wives, because we've killed women, children, everyone. Okay, and they said, what one is there of the tribes of Israel that came not up to Mizpah to the Lord? And behold, there came none from the camp of Jabesh Gilead. So apparently this one clan of the Gileadites didn't come up, and so they and help, okay, like offer up troops for this invasion. And so the people repented them for Benjamin because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. In other words, he tore a chunk out of it. And the elders of the congregation said, how shall we do for wives? Come on. What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since there are no women left in Benjamin? And they said, there must be heirs for the survivors of Benjamin in order that a tribe may not be blotted out from Israel. Okay, the fact that there's 12 tribes needs to be kept. It's sacred. Yet we cannot give any of our daughters for wives, for the Israelites have sworn, cursed be anyone who gives to Benjamin. So they said, look, the yearly festival... okay, hold on. So they go up to the Jabesh Gilead with 400... Oops. So the congregation sent 12,000 soldiers there and commanded them, go up to the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead to the sword, including the women and the little ones. Okay? So what happened? When the Israelites were called to go to war, no one from Jabesh Gilead went, so they went and killed every man, woman, and child in the city. Okay? And then it says, this is what you shall do. So the Lord doesn't tell them to do this. They just decide to do this on their own. Kill every man, woman, and child from Jabesh Gilead. And they found the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had never slept with a man, and brought them to the camp of Shiloh, which was at the camp of Canaan. So apparently there's 400 young ladies who've never known a man, and they killed all their families. Okay, so you're probably looking at, couple thousand people they killed, and these are their virgin daughters left. Okay. Then the whole congregation sent word to the Benjamites who were at the rock Ramon and proclaimed peace to them. Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the women who they saved alive of the women at Jabesh Gilead, and they did not suffice for them. So in other words, it was not enough for them. And the people had compassion on Benjamin because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. So the elders of the children said, what shall we do for wives for those who are left, since there are no women left in Israel in Benjamin? And they said, there must be heirs for the survivors of Benjamin in order that a tribe may not be blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give any of our daughters to them as wives, for the Israelites have sworn, cursed be anyone who gives a wife to Benjamin. So they said, look, the yearly festival of the Lord is taking place at Shiloh. So apparently they're still having an annual feast, or they're probably keeping the feast days there, and this is probably the Feast of Tabernacles, okay? Which is north of Bethel, and on the east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, the Lord at Lebanon. Okay, so they're like, well, we're gonna all come up to where the Lord is and have a Feast of Tabernacles soon. Why don't we just let them kidnap a bunch of women there? And they instructed the Benjamites, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards, and watch when the young women of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards each of you, and carry off a wife for himself from among the young women of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. So they're going to literally let them kidnap the women of Shiloh, the young virgins who come out to dance at Feast of Tabernacles or whatever feast this is. It's vineyards, so it seems like it's probably in the fall. Okay. Then if their fathers or brothers come to complain to us, we will say, be generous and allow us to have them, because we did not capture in battle a wife for each man, but neither did you incur guilt by giving your daughters to them. Okay? Listen to what these guys are saying. Rather than going to the Lord and to the priest and saying, what should we do about this situation? They're just like, well, technically, if we let them kidnap the woman, we're not giving wives to them. This is how a Jew thinks. This is how they work their way around obvious problems, okay? And then the Benjamites did go, and they took their wives for each of them from the dancers whom they abducted, and when they returned to their territory, they rebuilt their towns and lived in them. So the Israelites departed from there by that time by the tribes of their families, and they went out to their own territories. And in those days there was no king of Israel, and all the people did what was right in their own eyes. Okay? So the way these two stories are tacked on at the end of Judges, they obviously don't want to edit the original so much that they put them in the right chronological order, but it makes it sound like this happened right before they make Saul king, and that's not true. If you go to Saul's lineage in Chronicles, it's going to be in there. You're going to have Chronicles 8, and you're going to see Benjamin became the father of Bela's firstborn, Ashbel the second, Ahira the third, okay? So the other 7 sons have no descendants left, okay? Noha the fourth, so that's apparently where that city is Rapha the fifth, so that's that other city. I'm sorry. So he does have 5 sons left, it looks like. So he has 5 sons out of the original, I think, 9, okay? And Bela has sons Adar, Gera, and Abihud. And Abishua, Naaman, Ahoa, Gera, Shaphunim, and Huram, okay? So what it looks like it's saying, and Bela had sons Adar, Gera, and Abihud. Abihud might be Abishua, had Naaman and Ahoa. Gera had Shaphunim and Huram. It looks like that unless he has 2 sons named Gera, okay? And these are the sons of Ehud. Remember, Ehud is a son of Gera. It's probably, again, these generations would still be in Egypt, okay? And these are the sons of Ehud. This is Ehud from the book of Judges. They were the heads of the ancestral houses of the inhabitants of Geba, and they were carried into exile in Manahath, okay? So this is Geba. Remember, this is where they were when they came out and attacked them. And Ehud seems to be from there, okay? Naaman, Abahijah, and Gera, that is Heglam, who became the father of Uzzah and Ahihud. And Sherem had sons in the country of Moab after he had sent away his wives Hushim and Bara, Shesharim. So this is one of the guys apparently that they made divorce his Moabite wives. These are the genealogies that are going to be after they come back to the land, okay? And he had sons by his wife Hodesh, Jobab, Zibiah, Mesha, Malcolm. And it says Jael, the father of Gibeon. There's Gibeon. Remember, there's Gibeon and Gibeah. Lived in Gibeon, and the name of his wife was Micah. And the firstborn was Abdon, Zer, Kish, Baal, Nadab, Gedor, Ahio, Zechur, and Mikloth became the father of Shimeah. And all these lived opposite their kindred in Jerusalem with their kingdom. And Ner became the father of Kish. There's Kish. And Kish of Saul, Saul of Jonathan. Okay, so it's not the clearest about where these guys came from because this genealogy is kind of jacked up a bit. But it looks like this Ehud was one of those 600 men. He was prominent, and he could potentially have been Saul is not descended from him, but Saul comes from Gibeon. The city they destroyed was Gibeah, and Gibeon is the city that was full of those Canaanites that they let live, and they apparently take over that afterwards. Okay. So in conclusion, these two stories are going to take place, it looks like, in the first generation after they get into the promised land, okay? So the first generation they're in there, they're entirely wiped out. By the time they get to Saul being picked as king 400 years later, roughly, it's going to 3 to 350 years later, he's saying how he's from the smallest tribe in Israel, from the smallest house in that tribe, okay? Gibeah, the town where all this bad stuff happened. No, I'm sorry. Gibeah gets rebuilt, and then Saul eventually comes from there. And he has an ancestor, it seems like, named Gibeah, and either the city's named after him or whatever. So all of that is going to take you through, and I'll start with Ehud next time, because Ehud seems to be either the son of, or probably the son of, because it's been 180 years, so it's a descendant of, or 100. It's been roughly 100 years. No, I'm sorry. Ehud rises up right after Othniel dies, 18 years after Othniel dies. So he's probably a descendant of these lefties who survived Benjamin, and they could fling a hair at a stone at a hare, and they're awesome fighters and stuff like that, but they're almost entirely wiped out. And Ehud is going to rise up from them, and he's going to be the next judge. The rest of this stuff is going to be pretty chronological. So I'm going to try to clear through much of the rest of this next time. It might take me 1 or 2 sessions to do that. There was a lot of historical backstory for this one, so that's why it took so long. But we'll see. I think we just did 4 or 5 chapters at the end there, and so we just did 7, 8 chapters of it out of 24. So we'll try to do the rest in like 2 sessions. But I mean, that's going to kind of give you the lay of the land. We're in Israel, and they already have a counterfeit priesthood. They've already almost wiped out Benjamin. Othniel, the son of Caleb, is dead, and we know that it says that this is what's kind of weird. We know Othniel's with them when they go into the promised land, and it says all the elders of the generation that lived to see the wonders of the Lord. I'm guessing they're talking about the people who came out of Egypt as children. That is what I'm guessing is the wonders of the Lord, because obviously Othniel's after that, and Othniel would have been around when they destroyed Jericho and all that. Okay, so the wonders of the Lord are probably referring to the things that happened in Egypt and in the wilderness, and that generation is dead. Othniel is going to be from the generation that goes into the promised land. Probably were born in the wilderness, and then now they're in 2 generations that entirely were born in the promised land. We're talking about 100 years deep now. Okay, so I hope you guys are blessed by that. Again, just remember, when you're reading Joshua and Judges, those last 2 chapters were tacked on probably after the captivity, probably by people associated with the priesthood, and they really happen right off the bat. Okay. Other than that, I hope you guys are blessed by this. Enjoy your comments. I've been getting a lot of comments from people that I'm getting sick of. I get people who say things that are just completely ignorant, and then you give them the facts and the information. They're like, well, that's just your opinion. If I see a comment that's just ignorant and stupid from now on, I'm just not going to respond to it, or I'm going to delete it, because I'm really getting tired of proud, stubborn, foolish people who don't know how to discern facts and evidence and think it's just a matter of 2 different opinions. Well, I think this. Well, I think that. Well, that's not how facts and evidence work, and I'm trying to give you guys facts and evidence, and I'm trying to teach you how to learn. If you don't want to rely on facts and evidence and just have an opinion, keep your comments to yourself. I don't want to hear it. Start your own channel. If you want to teach somebody something, start your own channel, because there just seems to be no shortage of people who get on here and say something completely ignorant and want to correct me on something. And it's like, if you're going to correct me, give me facts and information that I can look at and not know off the top of my head are wrong. Okay? So, other than that, again, I'm just going to answer a lot less comments because it's getting frustrating. It's just getting annoying to me. This channel apparently attracts a lot of conspiratards and wingnuts that don't know how to think. So, hope you guys are blessed by this, and I'm going to try to keep going. Next one, I'm going to talk about. I don't know. I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about. There's more preterist stuff that I want to talk about, but I'm going to try to do one on something other than the Bible and then one that's just on the Bible every week and keep going. So I hope you guys are blessed by this and you have a great rest of your week. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.